welcome or welcome back. My name is Yuna and it is June. It is Pride Month, so happy Pride to all of my queer readers out there. I feel like my shirt is gonna get cut off, I can't quite tell, but the shirt says, "Sounds gay, I'm in," and that is basically the theme for this month's reading vlog. There was no question about it. I knew that in June that I wanted to put out at least a few queer-centric videos, but I wasn't sure which books I was going to read for the reading vlog. If you watch my June TBR, you'll perhaps already know that I was going back and forth between doing 2 books, 3 books, which books. I was pretty sure I wanted to do A Language of Limbs and Sunburn, but I was going back and forth between whether I should try to add Young Mungo and Devil of the Deep, but I decided, you know what, fuck it. It's Pride, so what I'm going to actually do is I'm just going to try to read as many queer books as I can, and we'll just see what ends up in the vlog. I have a few novellas. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to put all the novellas in there, but we'll see which full-length novels I get to. Obviously, I haven't read them yet, but all of these books I think have different types of queer representation. Some of these books are very much about the queer experience, about queer identity, about coming out, about homophobia, about navigating all of that, while others are about queer characters and queer relationships, but it's not necessarily a world or setting in which homophobia is an issue. They're queer normative worlds, and some of these books I think have queer characters, queer main characters, but they are not about the queer experience in any way. It is just representation in a world that is queer normative, where being queer is just a part of their lives and it's not something that's contentious. So yeah, I think there's going to be different types of queer rep happening throughout, and I think that is very important because a lot of the time when people talk about queer literature or queer books or recommend queer books, they talk about books that are very much about the trauma that can be associated with being queer or trying to settle into or be proud of or live in your queer identity. And while those stories are real and important and deserve the spotlight when they get them, I think it is also so joyful and healing to be able to read stories in which queer characters are just queer and that's not the central point of their story. And I love especially when fantasy writers write queer lives like that, because sometimes I'm like, if we can imagine a world where there's dragons and titans and gods, maybe we can just write a world in which it's fine to be bi or to be trans or to be non-binary. Yeah, I'm trying to do a mix of different types of queer representation in the books that I'm going to try to read. I'm pretty sure I'm going to start off with 3 novellas, and I meant to have them for this video, but I put them somewhere and I don't feel like getting up to look for them, so I'll just put them on the screen. But I have The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Kah, and this I'm pretty sure has a non-binary main character and is also written by a non-binary author. This is a horror novella. I think it's like a dark fairy tale sort of retelling of The Little Mermaid or something like that. There's a mermaid, there's cannibals or something, there's children that never die, there's a plague doctor. One of them is non-binary, I think, and Cassandra, I've never read any of their works before, but I have heard that they are a really beautiful, lyrical, descriptive, grotesque type of writer. The other 2 novellas that I want to read are by Becky Chambers, whom I love so very dearly. I love her works so much, but I'm going to be reading the Monk and the Robot duology. The first book is Psalm for the Wild Built, and the second is Prayer for the Crown Shy. I'm pretty sure. These 2 are very different from The Salt Grows Heavy. These are cozy fantasy sci-fi novellas, and they follow a robot and a tea monk who I think end up having a series of philosophical discussions about human nature, about what humans need to be happy. I'm pretty sure that either one or both of them are non-binary or gender fluid or genderless or something like that. I'm gonna have to read the books to find out, but Becky Chambers is such a beautiful, warm, healing, just cozy tea and a hug type of writer. She just brings so much joy to me, and she makes me cry almost every time I read one of her books, but it's one of those cathartic cries of being like, oh, this person understands what it's like to have a human experience and is writing about it so beautifully through generally non-human characters. So I'm very excited to read those 2 books, and I think I'm going to start with those 3 because they're short. If I don't get to any of the other books, at least I'll have 3 books to talk about for this vlog. The full-length books that I'm going to try to read for this vlog I do have in front of me. So the first one is A Language of Limbs by Dylan Hardcastle. So this is supposed to be a queer coming-of-age novel that's set in Australia, and I'm a little confused as to exactly how the book is supposed to be structured because it says Newcastle, Australia, 1972. On a sticky summer night, a choice must be made: to give in to queer desire or to suppress it, to venture into the unknown or stay the course. In alternating chapters, we trace two versions of a life that follows. I can't tell yet, obviously I haven't read it. I can't tell if it's two versions of one person's life, like if you chose door A it would be this, and if you chose door B it would be that, or if it's two people who have similar starting points and take different trajectories. I'm not sure, but I will find out as I read, and I have heard that this is written with very descriptive and lyrical prose, and that's my jam. That's what I love. So I am super excited for this. I'm going to start out with this one, and then the second book that I'm going to try to read, let's put this here. Second book I'm going to try to read is Sunburn by Chloe Michelle Howarth, and this is another coming of age story. This one is set in a small town in Ireland and is about a young girl named Lucy who is growing up and falling in love with her female best friend, and she has to decide what she's going to do about those feelings, and set in like a small town situation where I think it's a type of small town where people like up your ass and in your business. I read in reviews and even on the back of the book that this is written with a more lush and evocative and emotional type of writing, and that is always my preferred type of prose. I don't have an order that I'm really going to try and read these in, but maybe this will be second. I have no idea. The next book I want to get to is this one. It is Devil of the Deep by Valencia Jean-Francois, and this was one where I had said I wanted to save this for one of those videos where I read books just based off the cover and see if it lives up to the expectations I have based on the cover. But I decided whatever, I will try to read it for this vlog, and if I end up not getting to it, then of course I can save it for a future video. But I will try to get to this one. Book I don't really know too much about. I do want to still go into it a little bit blind. I picked this up at BookCon and it was sold to me. The person at the table said, pick up this book if you want to read about queer, black, Haitian mermaids and pirates, and I was like, yeah. I don't want to read the whole synopsis, but I'll read you some of the review quotes on the back. It says, a love letter to queer people of color. So yeah, this is Devil of the Deep, and I have heard nothing about it online. I don't think I've seen anyone talk about it, so I'm going into it pretty blind and without having read a single review, but I have high hopes. I feel like this could be really fun. The last book that I will try to get to for this vlog is Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart, and this is by the author of Shuggie Bain, which is somewhere here. Douglas Stewart is a Scottish author who writes so heartbreakingly and tenderly and vulnerably about family relationships, about the working class family, about complicated, broken, lovable people. This book is supposed to be, I think, another coming of age story about a young boy named Mungo who is queer, and he is falling in love for the first time with a boy named James, and I am assuming that things aren't going to go smoothly because I'm being promised a nuanced and gorgeous heartbreaker of a novel. Shigebe made me cry ugly so many times. I cried on camera when I was reviewing it, so I am really expecting no less from Young Mungo. I feel like this book is probably gonna wreck, destroy, and stomp on my soul, so I'm looking forward to it. So with these 4 books and the 3 novellas that I mentioned, those are the 7 options I have for this month's reading vlog, and I doubt I'm not going to get to all 7 of them, especially because I'm going to be pretty busy this month. I have a few friends who are coming from out of state and they're going to be staying with me for almost a week, and I have a book crawl that I'm doing at the beginning of the month and just like a bunch of other things. So I don't think I'm going to have a whole lot of time to be filming all this content for all of these books, but I'm going to try my best to get to as many as I can. I'm going to say that I'm gonna, with the novellas, since those are 3 short novellas, maybe get to like 5 or 6 books. But since I'm going to be trying to cram more than usual into this one reading vlog, I am going to be keeping the check-ins pretty sparse. For the longer books, I'm probably just going to do a halfway check-in and then a final check-in. And for the novellas, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll also do the same thing, just do like a halfway and then at the end, but they're so short. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll just come in at the end and just do one review for all of the novellas, but we'll see. I'll see how it goes. The first behind the scenes bit that you're probably going to see after this is going to be me going on the book crawl with my friends, but after that will probably be me talking about the novellas. So yeah, I will see you then. So I started reading The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. This is gonna be the first of the novella, like little mini reviews that I'm doing. Their writing is insane. I love their prose so much. I'm literally only this far in. I've read 16 pages and the novella is short, so that's not like nothing. But of the 100-page novella, I've read about 16 pages. This is already so brutal and carnal and visceral and so beautifully written. I'm eating it up. This is 16 pages of just dark, atmospheric, gory, like dripping, delicious prose. I'm probably gonna end up reading all of this like tonight or maybe tomorrow morning because it's what time is it? I'm definitely gonna end up blasting through this in like a day. I wonder if there's something I can read you from the beginning. I'm just gonna read you a couple of lines so that you can maybe get an idea of the kind of prose I'm talking about. You could be forgiven for mistaking the ruined house a ribcage, the roof its tent of ragged skin. The foundation at a careless look could pass for bones, the door for a mouth, the chimney a finger crooked at the sky, or at a wife who would not be a savior. I glance into the house. Two of my daughters look back, eyes shining. They are seated astride a twitching form, its limbs too small to have belonged to an adult. Like cats, they croon to one another, even as they nibble their fins and fingertips clean. One fishes a gnawed-down finger bone from her maw, flicks it to the ground. The other pounces, and for a moment I glimpse the fair circle of their victim's face, its eyes gouged, its cheeks flenched, its skull emptied of sweetbreads. Mermaids, especially those born half-prince, leave nothing to waste. I'm just loving how dark and weird and creepy and atmospheric it is, and I just realized that on the cover they have a quote by N.K. Jemisin, who, what a goat. So far, first impressions, 10 out of 10. Illy Hall. You barking? Oh, like a girl. My baby. Hi, hello. I am back home from day one of the book crawl with my friends. We had a bunch more bookstores that we were hoping to get to, but a lot of them ended up closing early. They closed at like 4, 5, 6, so we didn't end up getting to all of them. But I went to 4 and I picked up a few books, so I wanted to show them to you guys. The first bookstore we went to is called Book Trader of Hamilton. I don't know if you're able to see that, but Book Trader of Hamilton. And I picked up The Wild Robot. This is book 1 in, I think, a trilogy. I saw the movie The Wild Robot with my mom, and it made us weep. My mom and I were both just sobbing in the theater. That is such a beautiful movie. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely watch it. The soundtrack is beautiful, the animation is beautiful, the story will make you cry. But I didn't know when I watched the movie that it was a book series. I only found out after. So I have been trying to get all the books. So from Book Trader of Hamilton, I was able to pick up book 1, and this is used, but it's like pretty much in like new condition. Afterwards, we went to the Labyrinth. It's a bookstore that I've gone to a couple times, but I didn't end up getting anything for myself there. I picked up The Red City by Marie Lu for my friend, but I didn't get anything for myself. And then afterwards, we went to an adorable, like a freaking adorable bookstore called The Bear and the Books. I don't know, I hope you can see that. It was mostly books for young readers. It was like young adult and under, so they had books for like very young kids, elementary school, middle grade, and then like up to young adults. And while I was there, I found book 2 of that series called The Wild Robot Escapes. Oopsie. So I got book 2. I just have book 3 that I'm missing, and that's called The Wild Robot Protects. So tomorrow we're doing day 2 of our book crawl, and we're gonna try and hit another, like, I don't remember, like 5 or 6 bookstores. So my goal for tomorrow is to try and find The Wild Robot Protects in a paperback edition so that I can have the full set. But yeah, so I got Wild Robot Escapes from The Bear and the Books, and I also got this this illustrated copy of Black Beauty. I know I just got that special edition for my birthday a couple months ago, but I saw this and it has such beautiful illustrations. It has some black and white illustrations, but also these like full color, what the hell, like this, just like all throughout the book. There's a bunch of beautiful painted illustrations, so I caved. I caved and I bought it. See, look at that. And then the last bookstore we went to was, what was it called? Second book? No, it's called Act 2 Books. Act 2 Books. They had the cutest freaking dog. You'll have seen footage of it, but his name was Chase, and he just like plodded out from behind the counter and just plopped down, and incredible, beautiful, perfect dog. From Act 2, I got Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. I've been meaning to read this book forever, and I was going to just get it from the library, but I saw it. I want to support local bookstores. I want to support small businesses, so I was like, whatever, I'll just buy it from these people. So yeah, this was my little book haul, and I am so happy with them. So tomorrow, when we head out, I'm going to try to be good and not get more than like 3 more books, but one of my goals is definitely going to be to try to complete the Wild Robot trilogy and find The Wild Robot Protects. But I had such a good day. It was a lot of fun. I loved seeing the small businesses and talking to the owners. They're very passionate about what they do and they love the books, and I think the book crawl is such a good idea because it gives them a chance to meet new customers, like, you know, bring new customers to their stores. I had a great time, a wonderful time, and it's always a good time hanging out with my buds. I'm very excited to do it again tomorrow. So I just finished Song for the Wildborn by Becky Chambers, and going into it, I already knew that I love Becky Chambers, and so I was expecting something philosophical and heartfelt and very humane and beautiful, and that is exactly what I got. I think that Becky Chambers has such a way of using sci-fi scenarios or scenarios where you are oftentimes interacting with a creature that is so unhuman. You know, in her other books that I've read, her Wayfarer series, we're interacting with alien races that operate and think and exist so differently from human beings, and yet she is somehow able to use those interactions to highlight what is most human, to highlight what is at the heart of humanity, to talk about the things that we as a species have forgotten or moved away from, or whatever it may be. And this book was exactly the same. This book, I think, is very much about purpose and meaning and why we as humans do what we do, why we crave a purpose, like why we feel like we have to achieve something in order to prove that we have done well or that we are worthwhile. It's a book that really, it tells you you are so valuable and worthy just by existing. I love to say you don't have to earn rest. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to earn contentment. I think one of the other strengths of Becky Chambers using the sci-fi scenarios, sorry, you can hear Lucy, she's scratching at her little box. But yeah, she builds these different societies and these different species who operate very differently and exist so differently. And I think that it's such a cool way for her to highlight the fact that our society, our economy, our politics, it's all made up, right? We made this up. Money, that's just fucking paper. There's literally no reason that our lives should be ruled by these things that we made up and could very easily change. Like, we as a society, we as a species could decide, hey, actually this capitalism thing doesn't fucking work, or 5-day work weeks, like 40-hour work weeks, we made that shit up. Like, people wake up and think that that's the only way to live. It is literally one of an infinite number of ways that we could have chosen to live and could still choose to live, and that's how we're settled. We could choose to live differently. We could choose to live in such a way where people aren't so bound by these things called careers, and we could just exist in a way where we're not so tied down to what we can do for the economy, where our value and our productivity isn't what's most important about us. It's just the fact that we want to exist and we want to experience and we want to marvel, and we just want to take a deep breath and spend our time on this planet, literally the one life all of us get to have, and do more than just be productive. I don't know, I could go on about this forever. Obviously, I really enjoyed this book. It really touched me really deeply, and it spoke to a lot of things that I think about. Like, if no one is hating on capitalism, I'm dead. if capitalism doesn't have a single hater, me and all my friends, me and all my homies are dead. I'm rambling, I know, but I'll come back and give my more collected full thoughts once I have read the second book in the series, which I have right over here. I'm going to start post haste immediately with a prayer for the Crown Shy, which is book 2 in the series. I don't know if book 2 explores similar things or if it kind of touches on a different theme, because this one, like I said, is very much about like purpose. Like, what is our purpose? What do people need in order to feel fulfilled? And I don't know if we do something slightly different in this book. I don't care. I'm so excited. I love Becky Chambers. I love the way she makes me feel. I love the things she talks about and the way that she incorporates a lot of the things that I grapple with on a daily basis, and just it gives it to me in such a beautiful written story. But I'm gonna stop rambling. I'm going to read book 2, Prayer for the Crown Shy, and I think I will come back and give like my overall thoughts of the 3 novellas, these 2, and I don't know where I put Salt Grows Heavy, but I'll come back and do a review of those 3 books before I start on my full-length reads. So far, I'm loving these so much. This vlog is off to an excellent start because I finished the 3 novellas that I wanted to read for the vlog, and I had such a good time with all of them. First, I read The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw, and then I read A Song for the Wild Built and A Prayer for the Crown Shy duology by Becky Chambers. They were all excellent. I talked about the Salt Grows Heavy and Psalm for the Wild built a bit while I was reading them, so I'm just going to give what I hope are pretty quick reviews of all three of these books, because I'm going to have to do it again in my monthly wrap-up, so I'm going to try not to ramble on for too long, but I want to talk about all three of them. First of all, I will say that all three of these books are written by queer authors and have non-binary or genderless characters in them. The stories themselves, or the storylines, are not about being gay. It's about characters who are queer and have stories that have nothing to do with that identity. And I mean, of course, your life and your choices and your perspective, all of it is informed by your identity and how you move through the world. So you can't really have a queer person or queer character and say that their life is not about being queer, because obviously they're queer. The first book that I read was Salt Grows Heavy, and I was gushing over how much I loved Cassandra Claw's writing style. T. Kingfisher said, "The bones of a fairy tale sunk deep in a carnal house of descriptive prose, an elegant confection with a death-soaked core." So this is kind of like a dark, gory retelling of The Little Mermaid, except it's after the story ends, and it's kind of like, what happens if The Little Mermaid has a bunch of children who eat their father and the entire country, and then The Little Mermaid runs away with a non-binary plague doctor and comes across a forest full of children who are being experimented on and can never die. It's pretty hard to describe the plot without it just sounding absolutely bonkers, because it is pretty bonkers, but it is so atmospheric and dark and creepy, and I had a really good time with this. Although I will say that I think this is a book that for me was heavy on the vibes. Very, very heavy on the vibes, and I think I did lose track of the story a bit. Like, there's definitely things that the book is saying and talking about their themes, like bodily autonomy, about identity, about immortality, about home, about place, about constructed identity. But I think that a lot of the times I was trying to keep up with the atmosphere. And also Cassandra Claw has such a broad vocabulary. I was frequently pulling out my phone and being like, what the hell does this word mean? So I think throughout that I ended up losing track of the plot a bit, and that was fine. I didn't lose track of the plot and find that was a detriment to my reading experience. I felt like I was more or less kind of just swept up in this dark, gory, carnal experience, and I came out at the end of it being like, well, that was a time. Oh, and I forgot to say that the queer rep in this book comes in the form of the plague doctor, who is described as genderless, and they have a connection with the mermaid that builds into this romance, this dark romance, which I very much enjoyed, even though it does have touches of that sort of like, not insta love necessarily, because they've known each other, but I didn't really get to see a relationship build or anything like that. So to me, it felt like insta love, but that was okay. In the context of what was happening, I still had a pretty good time reading it. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. Let me read you a little example of their prose in the book, and it's pretty spoiler free. "The physiology of my species is protean, unmettered by logic. When we breed with angels, our children accrete feathers. When we lay with hurricanes, we birth storms, wind spirits with the voices of dead sailors. 1,000 mythologies contributed to my conception. Who can say which of them was responsible for this miracle? This is not my grief to split from throat to belly, not my past to reconstruct with viscera and ice. And besides, who am I to speak on this? All of my kind are just souls with a cloak of skin and scales, barely tethered to the act of living." Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what I would rate this yet, but I had a really good time, and I definitely want to pick up more of Cassandra Claw. And I would recommend this if you're someone who enjoys like dark fairy tales or horror and are just looking for something short and easy to get through. Easy to get through if you don't mind looking up some words that you probably don't know the meaning of. Alright, and then The Monk and the Robot duology. Becky Chambers is just incredible. Becky Chambers never fails to make me cry, and I feel like I said this earlier in the video at some point, but she makes me cry, not just in the way of where I'm like emotional and sad, but she just makes me cry with the relief of feeling seen as a human being. I think there's so many things about life and being a human and the human experience and being a human trapped in this society that we have made for ourselves that is just so full of bigotry and prejudice and this capitalistic mindset that it's so exhausting. And I think that Becky Chambers just has such an incredible talent for writing, speaking to those experiences and speaking to those struggles in such a beautiful way that doesn't feel patronizing or belittling or like she is being prescriptive. She just writes in a way that leaves so much room for exploration and thought about how we live, about what it means to live, about the things that we take for granted as being normal or obvious. Like, this is obviously the way that we should be living, or this is just how people live. And she asks you the question, like, well, why is that? Could it be different? Could you think about the way you are approaching life and the way you're approaching the people around you and the things around you and nature and your place in the world and all these things? Like, could you just maybe tweak your perspective a little bit? She just does it so beautifully every single fucking time. I rave about the Wayfarer series all the time. It's her quartet, and I implore you to read this. But if this is daunting, then perhaps you want to pick up this duology because it is so beautiful. This book takes place on a planet called Panga, where humans 200 years ago had been using robots to help with like manufacturing and things like that, but the robots gained sentience and decide, we don't want to live this way, we would like to go off and do our own thing. And the humans say, that's totally fine, we respect that, go live your lives, we won't interfere. And so robots and humans have been living separately for hundreds of years. And one day, our main character, one of our main characters, is this T-monk named Dex, sibling Dex, and they encounter this robot named Mosscap, and they end up having this, they travel together and have a series of interactions and conversations sort of centered around this main question that Mosscap has for humans, which is, what do humans need? Like, what do you need? And it's really beautiful because sibling Dex is someone who is feeling very unfulfilled in life and they don't know why. Like, they do things that they love. Like, their work is something that they love and appreciate and recognize is important. And yet still there's something missing from their life and they just can't put their finger on what it is. And through these conversations and these experiences with Mosscap, what is also beautiful is that they don't necessarily find the answer. It's not like they end this book or the series being like, this is what I need in order to feel fulfilled, but it's just the exploration of what that might mean. Both Mosscap and sibling Dex are non-binary. They are also really interesting because sibling Dex uses they them pronouns, and Mosscap prefers to be referred to as it because they are an object, and to them that is not derogatory or demeaning. They're saying, I would never say you're just an animal. You don't say I'm just an object. You don't have to be the same in order to be equal or in order to be equally important. And I thought that that was really beautiful. I enjoyed both books definitely, but I would say that the first book is definitely my favorite. It made me cry, which is not surprising, but I think that this book centers very much around this idea of purpose. Like, what is a person's purpose? Like, what does it mean to feel fulfilled, to find that thing that you're supposed to do in life? And I think that so many people around the world are struggling with that question, and I know that I have been grappling with that like so deeply and truly and horrifically every single goddamn day. I worry all the time because I have a wonderful job, I have a wonderful family, I have wonderful friends, and I think a lot of the time feel like I am racing towards the end of my life without feeling fulfilled, without feeling like I am happy, I am content, without feeling like I am living the life that I would imagine for myself. And that's obviously an incredibly distressing and frustrating thing to be going through. And I think, like I said, so many of us are feeling this. This book really hit home for me, and it's not a book that gives you answers necessarily, but it is a book that gives you space to think about the questions and to maybe, again, gives you space to think about the questions in a different way. So I think it's just a really beautiful hug that lets you know that you don't need a purpose. You don't need to do anything to be important. When you look at nature, when you look at trees, when you look at animals, you don't see a bird going like, well, what do I have to do in order to fulfill whatever I'm supposed to be doing with my life? Like, a tree is just a tree and just exists and it just sits in the sun and enjoys its time and that's perfectly fine. That's all it ever has to do. And I think that it could be so much simpler for humans too, because we made this all up, right? The whole structure of the way that we live, of our society, of our economy, of our politics, it's all stuff that we made up. And we act like we're locked into this and there's no other option when there are infinite other options, which is also interesting because more so in the second book, you kind of go into the way that Panga society is structured, things like their economy or like how they work around each other and their community in a way that's not the capitalistic money profit driven way that we are so used to living. And I thought that was really wonderful about the second book. I want to read you a quote from the first book, and it is, I don't know if it's a spoiler necessarily, because like there's not really a plot to these books. They're very much cozy philosophical fantasy sci-fi without an overarching like big plot that's driving anything. So if you're not into that, you might not enjoy these. But I can't say that it's necessarily a spoiler because again, there's not like a big plot or climax, but it's from the end of the book. So if you don't want to read that or hear that, then skip ahead a little bit. So this is Mosscap speaking to Sibling Dex in a conversation where it is trying to understand why Sibling Dex feels the need to have a purpose or feels the need to do something or to prove that they are succeeding in life. You are an animal, Sibling Dex. You are not separate or other. You're an animal, and animals have no purpose. Nothing has a purpose. The world simply is. If you want to do things that are meaningful to others, fine, good, so do I. But if I want to crawl into a cave and watch stalagmites of Frost Frog for the remainder of my days, that would also be both fine and good. You keep asking why your work is not enough, and I don't know how to answer that because it is enough to exist in the world and marvel at it. You don't need to justify that or earn it. You are allowed to just live. That is all most animals do. So yeah, and I just think that that's an incredibly important perspective for more people to take, because I think we humans think that ambition and purpose or the seeking of purpose is something that's instinctual or is natural to people. That's what sets us apart from the rest of the natural world. And one of the things that Mosscap suggests is that we are mistaking something that has been conditioned into us for something that is instinctual. I think that if we stripped people from the context of capitalism, of society, of economy, of careers, of ambition, of education, of like all these things that we think make up what makes up a fulfilling life, then we'd be pretty happy to sit in the sun and lay in the grass and eat fruit and make art and talk to our friends and fall in love and go to sleep, and that would be fulfilling. That would be a beautiful, wonderful, fulfilling, joyous life, and we wouldn't need to wonder like, oh, but I don't have X number of accolades, or I don't have this many degrees, or whatever it may be. And so for me, these books were really wonderful. They were very important for me to read and felt like I was being seen for a lot of the things that I've been struggling with. I will repeat that I like the first book a bit more than I like the second book. I think the second book was still really wonderful, and it touched on a lot of important themes also, such as about bodily autonomy, about what it means to have an identity that isn't tied to the body, family relationships, and a lot of other things. I just think that the first book had a much more narrow focus, and it's just something that it just resonated with me very much in this moment. I'm sure there are other people who will read this and find that this is speaking a lot more to the things that they are struggling with or thinking about at this time in their lives. Either way, I think you should read both of them. I think they're very wonderful. They're very short and easy to get through. So yeah, I love Mosscap. I love Sibling Dex. Love Becky Chambers. Am I keeping this short? I hope I'm keeping it short. Those are 3 books. I hope I got through those in a short amount of time. But now I'm going to move on to my first full-length book, which is going to be A Language of Limbs. This is going to be a pretty busy month for me, and I have my friends coming to visit in just like a few days. And while they're here, obviously I'm not going to be filming or doing any of this because we're going to be quite busy. We're going to be bopping around and barely home. So I think before they come, I'm going to need to film a couple videos. So I'm going to hop off of this and probably film another video. So if you see me in another video wearing the same shirt looking exactly like this, that's why. Hello again. I am halfway through A Language of Limbs, so I am here for my halfway check-in. This is the first of the full-length books that I decided to read, and it's not super long. It's not even 300 pages, so I've gotten through it pretty quickly. But yeah, so I'm at the halfway point, and I have a bunch of thoughts that I want to share. I think when I described this book in the beginning, I had said that I wasn't entirely sure what the structure of this book is, because it's described as on a sticky summer night a choice must be made, and then we trace 2 versions of a life that follows. So I wasn't sure when I started this book if we were going to be exploring 2 different people and the different lives they end up leading after the decision that is made, or if it was supposed to be 1 person and we're exploring 2 versions of their one life. And to be honest, I'm halfway through the book and I can't say that I'm 100% confident which one it is still. My current inclination is to think that the book is exploring 1 girl's life, but 2 versions of her life and how different they are depending on whether or not she chooses to pursue this queer desire that she feels. But I might be wrong. And I'm also not sure if that's just me being slow on the uptake and it's supposed to be obvious one way or the other, or if the author has made it purposely a little bit unclear. I think because originally I had thought that it was two different people. I don't know if I'm just like tripping myself up with the remnants of that assumption, or if it is supposed to be a little unclear. I genuinely am not sure. But either way, it's not necessarily taking away from my enjoyment of the book. And the book is structured so you are exploring these two different lives, and they are labeled as Limb 1 and Limb 2, and we go back and forth in alternating chapters between the two lives, or two limbs. Limb 1 follows the life of the girl if she does indeed go after this queer desire, and Limb 2 follows the life of the girl if she decides to suppress that queer desire and instead live a straight presenting life. The storyline of the two limbs is such that they basically mirror each other in terms of timeline. You're seeing where they would be at different points in their lives based on the decision that she makes. So far the book is pretty conceptual in its framing and in its narrative structure. I think the writing style is also very lyrical, and it has this sort of warm, aching quality to it. I love the way that Dylan writes some of their passages, because there's this feeling in the way that they write that there's this momentum building, and it feels like there's an emotion being generated that's just kind of being churned up, and you feel like you're coming towards this big explosion or something's going to happen. I don't know how to explain it. There are passages that I have read so far that almost feels like when you're standing at the edge of a cliff and you're watching the waves kind of start to roil, and you know that there's a big one coming, and eventually there's this big wave that crashes over the edge and just kind of like sprays you in the face with salt water. That's kind of the experience I have when I'm reading certain passages. They have a really beautiful poetic and momentum building kind of writing where there's a lot of tension and want. Let me see if I can find an example that is not spoilery. Because the summer rolled through me like dark thunder, hot and heaving, and she witnessed me in strikes of lightning, flashes of truth and ecstasy. With her, my naked body shifted from an object of desire to the subject of the story. She saw me in all my horror, my blood sparkling red, staining her fingers the first time she reached inside me, and I liked how it felt, being turned inside out, learning that the self becomes whole in the moment it is opened. There are parts in the book also where the writing feels like it's sort of right at the intersection of prose and poetry, and I'll read you one of the passages that I think feels quite like that. And it's early on. I don't think any of these are really spoilers. This is literally page 5. She makes sounds I haven't heard before, sounds that excite me, sounds that make my heart flutter like starling wings, like a great migration, south, a murmuration in the sky, swelling and contracting. The room is dark and blurry at the edges, everything is burning, aching deep inside, and it feels good, this ache, a pulsation making me feel that I'm alive. Together we bend and arc and grind in the unmoored glow. I look up. And there are a lot of lines that I think just have a really punchy emotional delivery, and some of them might not make sense out of context, but I'll just read you one. I exhale all the parts of me that imagined something else. I just think that's so beautiful. So yeah, the writing style I'm really loving. The two limbs are also very interesting to me because they are different enough that if I was reading them without really thinking, they feel like two very distinct people. And yeah, they're characterized very differently, in my opinion. I might have to just like sit and think about it a bit more. Limb 1 is the version of the life in which the main character does live a queer life. And it's interesting because it's actually the only limb or, life that we have where she has a name that we can call her by. We don't know what her name was before the book starts, but after she is kicked out of her home by her parents for they find out she's a lesbian and they kick her out of the home, and she is later enveloped into this queer community elsewhere in a different city in Sydney, and she takes on the new name Little Dave, and that's how she's referred to throughout the rest of the book. At least so far in Limb 1, she is known as Little Dave. I would say that Little Dave's story, Limb 1, is colored more by this sort of, how do I explain, like this chaotic, frenetic, exploratory energy. In Limb 2, she doesn't have a name that we can call her by. We don't know what the name is. And this story, Limb 2, I think is colored more by repression, which makes sense, right? But there's just this sort of quiet, repressed, like tamped down energy. It's also really interesting because when you read the story of Limb 2, you wouldn't necessarily think that she is unhappy or that she isn't living a full life. She has meaningful relationships. She is pursuing, a career. She has a great education. She's in a relationship that she seems generally happy with and seems like it is a good reciprocal relationship, especially from the outside. You just, throughout the story, you see her revisiting these queer desires and getting flashes back to the friend that she was attracted to at like the very beginning of the book. So that that's obviously a part of her that is still kind of aching and itching to find some sort of way to stretch its legs. I am very curious if we're ever going to have a name to call the main character in Limb 2, because the power of names and choosing names has come up a couple times, especially in Limb 1 with little Dave. Like she chooses a new name, but we also talk about the significance of names that other people that she lives with have chosen, the significance of the name of the house that they live in together. Yeah, multiple times throughout the book we've talked about the power and importance of names. So it is, or at least to me, seems pretty significant that in Limb 2, our main character, she doesn't have a name, or she hasn't been named. And there's this weird distance, I think, that exists because you don't have a name for this character. And she feels, I don't know, she feels like I'm not quite touching her, or I'm not quite in her head. So I'm interpreting that as it being pretty significant that Dylan has chosen not to give the character in Limb 2 a name. Obviously other people in her life know her name, but we as the reader, as the audience, yeah, we just don't have a name. And I'm very interested to see if it stays that way throughout the rest of Limb 2. So overall, I am really liking this book. I love the writing style, and I'm very intrigued again by this framing of Limb 2, Limb 1, the two different versions of the life. I think that there is something happening with the momentum of the plot where the going back and forth between the two lives and having it on the same timeline is feeling a little bit like I'm being shepherded, which is interesting because like the writing style and the structure is conceptual and kind of experimental, but the timeline feels so strict. So there's a weird juxtaposition between the two, and I feel like the actual plot, the momentum of the events is a little stagnant, but I just hit the halfway point, so I might see the momentum or the plot build more now that we're in or going into the second half of the book. One other thing about this book that I really appreciate is that Dylan took time at the beginning of the book to do an acknowledgement of country and to acknowledge the indigenous people, the Aboriginal people of the land where they wrote the story and where the story takes place, and you see that respect also woven throughout the story. There's just interactions and conversations or questions or events that happen that integrate that kind of awareness into the story. It's not like it's a big part of the plot, but it's definitely present, and I definitely appreciate that Dylan took the time to do that. But I think that's all I really have to say about the book so far. I'm going to read the rest of this. I don't think it's going to take me very long. I only have like, I don't know, 140 pages left, so I can probably finish this by tomorrow, to be honest. I'm very interested to see how the two limbs progress and eventually collide or overlap, because the dust jacket does say we witness these two lives shadow each other until finally and poignantly they collide. So I'm very interested to see what that collision looks like. So once I have read it, I will come back and let you know my thoughts. So I finished A Language of Limbs by Dylan Hardcastle, and listen, I don't know if I just wasn't rubbing my two brain cells together hard enough or if I'm just fully dumb of ass, but I was just completely wrong about the premise of this book until like the very last 5 pages. I said in my halfway check-in that I was pretty sure that the premise of this book was following one person, but looking at 2 potential versions of their life depending on a decision that they do or don't make. And that was not right. That was wrong. So I thought that this book was following one girl. I thought we started at a point in her life, and depending on whether or not she chooses to follow her queer desire or chooses to repress it, those are the 2 different limbs that we were looking at. So like alternate versions of one person's life, and that was wrong. So Limb 1 and Limb 2 are 2 completely different people, and it's so funny because when I first picked up the book, that's what I thought it was. I thought it was 2 different people, and for some reason I second guessed myself, or I thought that I read somewhere or someone said, or I just had a complete brain melt because I was like, oh no, that's wrong. I think it's actually one person. I don't know what happened. I don't know what miscommunication, what brain fry went down, but I was wrong. And so I feel like I had a really weird experience reading this book because I read it, I was unsure. There was no point at which I was 100% sure if it was 1 or 2 people, but I was more or less thinking that it was one person. So I feel like I had a weird reading experience because I was analyzing this book and the 2 limbs and the separate storylines with the wrong mindset, because I was analyzing it thinking that it was, again, one person when it was 2 completely different people having 2 completely different lives. So yeah, I feel like I have to read this again or go back and just like reanalyze what I thought about the book with this correct perspective. My failure as a reader aside, I did continue to love the writing style. I love Dylan's very like experimental and emotional and aesthetic writing style, and this book felt like it was bordering on being a long form poem. I love the conceptual nature of the book, and I like the concept of the two lives, even though the actual correct structure went right over my damn head. I still thought it was an interesting way to look at the way a queer life can unfold. I will say that I felt like the pacing was a little weird at the end. I think the ending felt quite rushed because you're sort of building towards this thing. I'll talk about it more in the spoiler section, but you're building towards something and it happens. I think it truly happens in like the last 3 pages of this book. So yeah, I didn't really know where to go with the pacing of this book because the ending felt a bit rushed. But again, I feel like I can't confidently give some of this feedback because I was thinking about the book in the incorrect way. But I do think that either way, I thought the ending was a little bit rushed, and I'm not entirely sure how I would restructure it for it to not be that way. But yeah, the ending was a little rushed for me, but I still really loved the concept of the book, and I really liked the writing style. I loved the queer representation. I love the exploration and representation of the things that queer communities have gone through that don't really get talked about a lot or aren't recognized. I love the advocacy for recognizing queer joy and queer love and queer community and not just queer trauma, even though they do talk about queer trauma and homophobia and all of that in this book. So I did have a bit of a hard time investing as much in Limb 2. I think because I was going into that story, that repressed queerness storyline, thinking, well, this probably isn't going to last. I just kept waiting for the shoe to drop. So there was just this kind of like waiting feeling I had throughout that storyline. So even though it was beautifully written and there were some really incredible passages throughout there, I think I was just like waiting for it to end or for something to happen. I'm gonna go into the spoiler section now. So it was indeed 2 people, and at the very end, I truly think that it's in like the last 10 pages or last 5 pages, we learn the names of the 2 women. So Limb 1 is the woman who was living a queer life. Her name was Lucy before she took on the name Little Dave, and she decides to she publishes or she puts out some of her poetry and she uses the name Lucy. So Limb 1 is Lucy, and Limb 2, her name is Suzanne. Was it Suzanne or Susanna? Literally on the second to last page, we find out that her name is Suzanne. So Limb 1, who is Lucy / Little Dave, her whole storyline is basically a love story with a woman named Kara. And Kara, at the end of the book, like towards the very end of the book, is killed in a hate crime. Limb 2 is Suzanne, and her story is more or less the story of her going to school, meeting and marrying this man named Thomas, who is an aspiring author, and it's about their marriage and their relationship. And she gets pregnant with Thomas after they are married, but she ends up miscarrying, and this kind of breaks them apart, and their relationship kind of crumbles after this miscarriage, and she decides to leave him. And it's in this state of loss and grief and change that Lucy and Suzanne end up meeting, because Suzanne is a publisher. She's working at a publishing company, and she comes across Lucy's poems that she has been writing, and she's put together into like a collection of poems. And so Suzanne reaches out to Lucy, and they end up meeting. And they end up meeting on the last page of this book, and the last page is just a dedication to them falling in love and finding new love and overcoming grief and realizing that there is more life for them to live. But again, this happens truly on the last page of this book. And the last page of the book, don't get me wrong, is beautifully written and it's really emotional, and there are some very poignant thoughts and feelings that are shared in that last page. It's just that it felt very sudden to me, and I think part of that is because I was dumbstruck because on the second to last page, my dumbass realized that these are 2 separate fucking women and it wasn't just one person. So I was like, what the and then they fell in love in the last page. So I think for me that was particularly jarring, but I can't say confidently if that is just my experience because of, again, the fucking epiphany that I had, or if it is actually speaking to the pacing of the story. I think I may have liked to see them meet and then have them getting to know each other or falling in love fleshed out just like a little bit, not a lot. It doesn't have to be like a whole 50 pages, but maybe just like 2 or 3 more pages would have been nice for me. because yeah, like I said, it just felt sudden. One last thing I'll say for the spoiler section is that one of my favorite characters, I think, in this book who was unexpected was Gwen. Gwen is Suzanne's mother-in-law. Suzanne married Thomas, and Thomas's mom is Gwen, and we find out at some point in the book that Thomas's dad Martin is ill, and we find out that he is ill and passing away from AIDS. And when they go to visit, Suzanne finds out that Gwen has known that Martin is gay, and she is still incredibly supportive and defensive and loves her husband. And she says, you know, I've known, like, I know that he is the way he is, and he is my best friend, and I love him dearly, and he is my husband, and we have a life together, and we love our son. And I just thought that it was a really nuanced and beautiful depiction of the way that love can happen, even in a scenario in which one of the people is hiding or repressing a very important part of themselves. And of course, it reflects very much Suzanne's own experience with Thomas, because she has married this man not telling him that she is queer or that she has had romantic feelings for women in the past and present, honestly. I just think that it was interesting to see those relationships and just the way that love can take shape even in those kind of scenarios. I'll end the spoiler section there and say that this was a beautiful story and it was beautifully written, and I think that I didn't do it justice as a reader because I was reading it with a completely skewed mindset or analytical eye, so I would love to reread it at some point now that I know where I went wrong. But even with that mix up, I do think that it was a beautiful story. I would recommend to people if they're interested in reading a story about queer lives and queer community and queer history. I guess my main notes for this book are that I feel like the ending was rushed / a bit sudden, and I think that I had a harder time investing in or really feeling connected to Lim 2's main character. But these might be more like personal preference things or just the experience that I had more than like a reflection of the book. So either way, I think that this was a lovely book. What would I rate this? I really, again, I feel like I don't know how to rate this because I'm reevaluating the whole experience I had, but I think that it's probably like 4 or 3.75, 3.75, maybe a 4. I'll think more about the rating and let all of this marinate, and I'll probably come back at the end of the vlog when I do my outro and give you a proper rating or whatever I'm thinking about the book. But for now, I'm going to set aside A Language of Limbs, and I'm going to start Sunburn by Chloe Michelle Howarth, and I'm going to do better. This book, I know it's one protagonist, it's one person, and I'm not going to get it all mixed up and messed up and screw myself over. So I'm gonna get to reading this and I will come back for my halfway update. Hi, hello, it's me again. I am here for my halfway check-in with Sunburn, and I am just continuing on this vein of not really knowing what the book is about or getting the general vibe or tone of the book wrong until I've read it, because Sunburn is another book that I thought that I knew kind of what I was getting into, and I was wrong. Also, sorry if you hear Lucy screaming. It's almost her breakfast time, so she's sitting like at my feet and periodically just yelling at me. Let me see if I can make her do it. Lucy! I hope you heard that, okay. I swear she is not being mistreated or starved. She is just dissatisfied with my service and the timeliness of her meals. This is another book that's not super long. It's less than 300 pages, so I feel like I'm probably actually going to end up finishing this like today. I have a bunch of time where I can be listening to the audiobook today for a few hours. I have some chores and things to be doing, so there's a good chance that I'm going to finish this today. But I will say I am 2 for 2 in terms of the longer books, not the novellas, but 2 for 2 for the books in terms of not going into it with the right expectations. I mean, it's not that I went into it with the wrong idea of the premise like I did with A Language of Limbs. This is a coming-of-age story about a girl named Lucy in a little town in Ireland, but I think I went into it thinking it was going to be kind of like a sweet, tender, emotional coming of age where I was going to be feeling very like protective of Lucy. And while it is a coming of age story, I have to say that Lucy and the girl that she is interested in, Susanna, they are both messy. They're both messy and they're way more unlikable than I thought they were going to be, but not in like a bad way really. It's just they are messy, flawed characters trying to get their feet under them, and they're doing it sometimes in very questionable ways. Lucy's a teenager living in this small town. It's one of those small towns where everyone has their noses up your ass and want to know your business without an invitation and are gossiping and talk about what's going on and have expectations of how your life's going to turn out. One of those very sort of claustrophobic type of small towns, but it's interesting because I think that the way that Lucy talks about the town, what is it called? Crossmore. She also talks about it with a lot of affection. I think she loves her hometown and she does have a lot of love for her life there and the people in it. But as this book opens, Lucy is kind of caught between these feelings that she's starting to have for her female best friend Susanna and her friendship with her childhood best friend Martin, who everyone sort of expects her to get with Martin. Everyone thinks that they're going to be a couple, they're going to end up together, and Martin is smitten. You can tell that Martin is really sort of infatuated with Lucy, but Lucy doesn't feel the same way back, even though I think she does love Martin and she enjoys the attention and care that he gives her. She doesn't think of him romantically. She doesn't feel any type of attraction to him. Where I've ended up in the book about halfway, Susanna and Lucy have kissed and they've told each other they like each other. They're kind of secret girlfriends, and yeah, it's so frustrating. Like I said, I didn't expect the characters to be so frustrating. I really thought it was going to be this tender but lush coming of age sapphic story, and it is that. In parts it is that, but the characters, wow, they're just so, they can be so mean and selfish and self-centered and like manipulative, and it's not very believably, right? Because these are teenage girls living in this small town with complicated family relationships, trying to navigate their sexuality and hide their feelings from people around them. It's all this stuff happening, and so I think it makes sense for these hormonal teenagers to not be perfect. I completely understand that. I think this book might be great for people who love to romanticize bad decisions. Which don't we all at times, but there is definitely some romanticizing of bad decisions, and there is this really strong, urgent infatuation and first love rose-colored glasses that I think that Lucy is looking at Susanna with. Because this is told in first-person point of view from Lucy's perspective, obviously you are getting the events in the relationship and you're getting Susanna from her point of view. So it's hard to tell, right, how much of it is her interpretation and her filtering of the experiences and this person, because it's her first love and she's coming into her queerness, she's figuring out that she's queer, but there is this deep infatuation that she has with Susanna, and again, how much of that is colored by these queer rainbow rose tinted glasses and just the heat of your first love, and how much of it is a real genuine connection. I don't know. I think that it seems so far, again, I'm only halfway, it seems like the two of them do care about each other in a genuine way, and they write each other these beautifully emotional and fraught and romantic letters. I think I might read you one of them because it's not really, I don't know that it's really, whatever. Maybe it's a little spoiler, but I'm going to read you one of the letters in a second. Yeah, I also really liked the first person point of view because I think it's written well. The writing style is easy to read, and I think that she Chloe Michelle Howarth. I think that she does a really good job of balancing a believable first person voice for a teenage girl, while still incorporating some really lovely descriptions and writing. I always think it's kind of funny when I do read first person point of views where the writing and the thoughts and like the stream of consciousness is so lyrical and poetic where I'm like, who thinks like this? Like, I have crickets in my head. There is one dust bunny chasing my one remaining brain cell around in my skull at all times. I'm just like, who's just sitting there thinking like this? So I really like the way the first person point of view is written in this book because it is well written, and I think that there are some really powerful passages, but it is very believable for being a teenage girl. Also, I just want to clarify that I'm not saying I don't enjoy first person point of views that are very lyrical and descriptive and written in that lush way. It's just I always sit there and think, I don't think like this. I could never think like this. I don't have a whole lot else to say right now. I feel like we are still building momentum in a lot of ways. I fear for Martin because Martin Martin is Lucy's childhood friend who just cares about her so much, and you just know that if she would just give him the slightest lingering eye contact and just suggested at the potential of the hint of the possibility of wanting to be with him, he would be there. He would be on that so fast. So I just fear that he's gonna get his little heart broken because he does seem like a sweet boy. Like, I don't think he's done anything so far to indicate that he is like not worthy of Lucy's attention or that he is a bad guy. He seems like a really nice guy who's trying his best to convey his interest to Lucy in a very respectful way. So I just worry that he's gonna get his little heart crushed. But also Susanna and Lucy, I just don't know where this is gonna go. It feels messy. I feel like we're hurtling towards some sort of problem and issue. I'm almost positive of it, but we'll see. We'll see. But before I wrap up this really quick midway check-in, I want to read you the letter that Lucy writes to Susanna. It's something that they do. They send each other letters back and forth. But the first letter that Lucy writes to Susanna after they have their first kiss, and these aren't spoilers. It says on the back of the book that they end up like getting together. But yeah, so I'm going to read you that letter, but if you don't want that spoiler, again, as always, just like skip forward a little. Susanna, save this letter. It marks the moment that my life finally started. I have never felt closer to heaven than I felt today on the road with you. I can only hope that it was real and that you will not change your mind. Now I am away from you. I have never felt further from home, further from myself. Susanna, since the day I met you, I have wanted to let you know that you are a spill of gleaming gold on my otherwise dull and pointless world. Yours always, Lucy. Big feelings. These girls have big feelings and are complicated and confused and selfish and young and changing and growing. So yeah, so far really enjoying this. But my current predictions are that Martin is going to get his little heart crushed by Lucy in some way, shape, or form. And Lucy and Susanna, there's no way that they're not going to be found out somehow. Someone's going to find out. It's going to be an issue. And I don't really know how Lucy and Susanna's relationship is going to end up. It has to fall out in some way. Maybe they end up back together, maybe they don't. I don't know, but I feel like it's gonna get messier. All right, it is several many hours later, the same day, and I did indeed finish Sunburn. And actually, I'm gonna take my glasses off because this glare is killing me. All right, now I am on the cusp of Legally Blind, but we're just going to do this without my glasses. So I did indeed end up finishing Sunburn today, and I'm going to take a minute to give you my final thoughts. I'll say overall, it definitely continued on the track of it being a different tone than I was expecting. I was expecting when I went into it this sweet, tender, like blooming young woman coming of age type of queer love story, and it was a messy hot mess but in a great way, in a wonderful way. It was a mess of complicated, selfish, questionable characters making questionable decisions, but it was the type of questionable, selfish decisions that I think really made sense for a group of young people, and specifically two young women, teenagers really, who are figuring out their sexuality, dealing with really complicated and sometimes traumatic family relationships, and living in a small town where everyone knows your business, wants to know your business, is gossiping about you. I think if you like reading about messy, questionable people making messy, questionable decisions, then you might really like this book. It really is about Lucy and her trying to choose between Susanna, her first love, her first sapphic relationship, or her hidden girlfriend really, and Martin, who is her childhood best friend, who is so devoted to her and really wants to be with her, but is just not someone that Lucy cares about in a romantic way. And Martin, for Lucy, very much represents a safety net because he's someone who really does care about her, and he is someone who is very easy for her to kind of push and manipulate and get him to do what she wants. And also B, because he's the person that everyone in her family and her community expects her to end up with. So she has this very safe route where she has a person who is so devoted to her that she knows that she could pretty much get him to do whatever she wants, and there's a sense of security and power and like self-worth in that. And that's not to say she doesn't care about Martin. She does. She thinks of him as her best friend, and I think that she does genuinely see what a wonderful person he is. But also Lucy is a selfish and manipulative person, and so she can use that to her advantage. She has this path where she can repress her sexuality and just travel the safe route with the person who she can be with and be safe with. Or she can go the route of being queer and being with Susanna, who is a chaotic and sometimes mean and also sometimes selfish and manipulative person who is quite the opposite of Martin, in that Lucy can't really ever get Susanna to do what she wants. She says frequently throughout the book that she is the one being told what to do, and she feels like she has no power. If Susanna tells her to jump, then Lucy says how high. One of the big points of tension between Lucy and Susanna is that Susanna wants to be out. She wants to tell people about her and Lucy. She wants people to know, whereas Lucy is much more afraid. She doesn't want this very religious small community to know about this relationship and these feelings and this identity that she has, and she doesn't want people talking about her. She's also very concerned about what it'll do to her relationships with her family and her friends, etc., etc. I continue to enjoy the prose. I thought that it was a good mix of accessible, believable first person with some really lovely passages, especially when she talks about Crossmoor, the town that she grew up in, her hometown. She just describes it and talks about it in a way that is equal parts possessive and nostalgic and appreciative with frustrated and claustrophobic. I'll move into the spoiler section now because I want to talk more about some of the specifics that happen later on, but also about some of Lucy and Susanna's relationships with their family. First of all, I have to say justice for Martin. I predicted that this boy was going to get his heart stomped on, and it for sure happened. At one point, Lucy has Susanna over and they are being intimate in Lucy's room, and her mom walks in on her, and Lucy's mom, she has some reflecting to do. She has to think about herself and how she values her family and her relationship with her daughter, because she had a type of reaction. She basically ices Lucy out and ignores her and just keeps pressuring her to be with Martin. She's just not able to process or accept Lucy being queer in any way. It just kind of has her shut down and unable to interact with her daughter at all. And Lucy sees this and she's like, I don't want to lose my family. She's like, I don't want to lose my mom. I don't want to lose my family. I want to still be able to have relationships with them. And part of this, I'm sure, is that genuine concern, but also it just feeds into her overall fear of being judged and persecuted. So she tells Susanna, I'm just going to pretend to be in a relationship with Martin to get my mom off my back, to get my family off my back, and to get the whole community off of my back. So she does pretend to be in a relationship with Martin, and she fully manipulates this boy. She says it outright in the book. She's like, I know I'm manipulative. I know this is selfish. I know this is so wrong, but I'm gonna do it anyway because it's about me. She knows that Martin is such a wonderful person who cares about her, who is so respectful of her, who wants to take care of her, who wants to be there for her. And she's like, I'm going to use this boy. I'm going to bend him like a pretzel into whatever shape I need. And she does. She absolutely does. And it is so selfish and awful. And she actually ends up moving out of Crossmoor with Martin when he goes to college. And they live together. They are intimate together, and they are in what is, for all intents and purposes, a romantic relationship and partnership for years. She does this for years while cheating on Martin with women. It's Lucy, girl, messy. And eventually Martin does discover that Lucy has been using him, that she has been in love with Susanna, that she was with Susanna, and I think he also finds out that she's been cheating on him with other women, even post Susanna. And he is just so on one hand, I'm like, boy, stand up for yourself. But on the other hand, he's like, I understand it's been difficult for you to be this person and navigate this. And he is as accepting and kind as can be in that scenario. And I just, on one hand, I'm like, all right, stand up for yourself, but also how bad did you have it for this girl that you have been with her for years and years, and lived with her, moved into a city, into an apartment with her, and lived with her as your partner for years without getting just the slightest inkling maybe that she isn't who she says she is, or she doesn't feel the way she says she feels. But on the other hand, I think it just speaks to how guileless and devoted Martin was throughout this book. So I feel really bad for him. I feel really badly for him, and what Lucy did to him was so wrong. So Lucy gets a thumbs down in terms of her behavior as a partner or girlfriend, but also Susanna is equally confusing and messed up for Lucy in that she has a very complicated relationship with her absent and neglectful mom, and she sometimes weaponizes her relationship with Lucy in order to get a rise out of her mom, or in order to get her mom to pay attention to her. She will kind of flaunt or use their relationship. So that's also very, that's shitty. There's just a lot of elements to all of these relationships. There's codependency, there's infatuation, there's manipulation, there's hiding each other, there's using each other, there's sometimes just being mean to each other. There's a lot that's going on, and I think that it was woven together really well. At the very end, obviously again, huge spoiler, at the very end, Lucy and Susanna, after having been separated and not having been together or really seen each other for several years, Lucy goes back to Crossmore and goes to Susanna's house, and they end up running into each other. It's one of those things where I'm like, do I want you two to be back together? I just don't know. I guess it really depends on where they're at and who they've become and what they can communicate to each other, all of these things. I'm not someone who doesn't believe in second chances. I think especially because of the complicated nature of them trying to come out and being repressed and figuring all of that out, it adds another element to all of this, where maybe they could, in a world where they didn't have to hide, have been really great for each other. And if they are now at a point where they can continue on in this relationship, being honest about who they are and their identities and their sexuality, maybe it'll be a very different scenario. So never say never, but I was just like, one thing that I liked about this book is that, I think it's really easy to take the position where you see Lucy with her mom who isn't accepting of her and being like, well, obviously, fuck your mom, like, fuck that relationship. It's more important that you're true to yourself and that you be with this person who loves you. But it's complicated, like I said. And in A Language of Limbs, we have a character, Kara, who was that character also named Lucy? Oh yeah, so Limb 1, Lucy, Little Dave's girlfriend, partner, Kara, she was not out to her family, and she says to Little Dave, she's like, I'm never going to tell my parents, like, it's never going to be something that I'm going to want to do, and it is important to me to have this relationship with them, and it is a kindness, it is a gift to them that I don't share this part of myself with them, and that I preserve the relationship and love that we have for each other. And Little Dave can't understand this. She's like, but that's a lie, like, you're not really showing yourself to them. And I think that there is no right way to come out or not come out, or to be out to your family. That's a really personal decision, and I don't think anyone should be able to dictate to you how it happens. Obviously, if you're in a relationship with someone, that's a conversation that's going to have to happen and be navigated in whatever way makes sense for that couple in that scenario. But you might be someone who reads this book and just thinks, well, Lucy, like, obviously Susanna knows you and she knows you're gay and she accepts you, and that should be more important than maintaining a relationship with someone who doesn't even know how to interact with you if they have to accept a part of your identity. But that's, it's something that takes a lot of time to process. It's not just some person. This is your mother, this is your family. These are relationships that most people would hope last their lives. Like, I personally appreciated seeing that, and seeing the way that Lucy tries to justify what she does and doesn't do. And while I'm rarely agreed with the decisions that Lucy made, I think that's an important thing to think about and talk about. So on the spoiler section there, and say that I had a great time reading this book. It kind of reminded me of some of the feelings I had when I was reading the Neapolitan Quartet, so like My Beautiful Friend and the subsequent books, where I'm like, these are messy people in a messy, nosy community. So I had similar feelings, and it also is kind of like, it's almost like Normal People meets the Neapolitan Quartet. I'm trying to think of how to describe it. It's kind of like the Neapolitan Quartet meets Normal People, but make it sapphic. All in all, I think I would give this 4 stars. 3.75. But now I am going to keep on trucking along for this vlog. I really am trying to get through a lot of books, so sorry if you don't enjoy these shorter check-ins where I'm not being as detailed or sharing like as many quotes or things like that. I am going to move on to the next book, which is going to be Devil of the Deep. I am very excited for some queer Haitian mermaid pirate adventure stories, so I will check back in when I am halfway. My friends are coming to visit like today, so I might have to read to the halfway point and then pause until they are gone so that I can do the check-in before moving on. But yeah, whatever happens, however the timing works, I will be back to tell you my thoughts on Devil of the Deep. Actually, let me show you the book. Here they are, Devil of the Deep. I think this is such a freaking stunning cover. It also works out well because it is also Caribbean Heritage Month or Caribbean Reading Month, one of those. So it is sitting for me perfectly at the intersection of Caribbean Month and Pride Month, because we have queer, Haitian, mermaids, and pirates. How many times can I say that? I will be back shortly. I can't believe I'm on the 6th book for this reading vlog, but I am here for my halfway check-in of Devil of the Deep. I am once again squeezing in this check-in between doing 1,000 chores. I've been running around like a mad person lately, so forgive me if I seem a bit scatterbrained or rushed because I am both those things, honestly. But I still want to come in to tell you my thoughts at the halfway point of this book. So I said that this was sold to me as read this if you want to read about queer, Haitian, Black mermaids, and pirates, and so far it has delivered on all of those things. So I'll give you a summary of the book so far. We follow 3 main characters, 3 point of views. We have the first character, who is Nena, who is actually the Devil of the Deep. She is an infamous pirate who is called Devil of the Deep. The second character is Lou, who is a fleet captain, so he is part of the official fleet. And the third character is a mermaid named Pearl, who is on the run from a god. You find out just from reading the back of the book that Lou and Nena have history. They used to be in love, they were lovers, but Lou thinks that Nena is dead because she walked the plank 5 years ago and he thinks that she drowned. But since then, she has become a pirate, and both of them are interested in or tied to this mermaid Pearl, who has an artifact, and Lou has been tasked with finding the girl and the artifact, and Nena is trying to protect her. So far this seems to be this big epic fantasy quest that has gods, has mermaids, has this lost island that's given me, Atlantis vibes. And it's been a good time so far. I'm definitely enjoying the audiobook. I've been reading some of this physically and some of it on the audiobook, and the audiobook narrator, I don't know if she's Haitian or if she's just very good at accents, but she does the Haitian accent really well. I mean, to my ears, I'm no expert obviously, but I enjoy listening to the audiobook when I'm not reading this physically. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail, but I don't think any of this is going to be spoilery. I'm not going to say anything right now that you couldn't gather from the back of the book. It's going into a little more detail. But so far we have Pearl, who has fled her mermaid home. She's in possession of this conch shell, which is a magical item that could help find or raise the island that is the lost home of her people, her mermaid people. But there is someone who has come to power that she does not trust and wants to use her and use the conch. So she has fled, and she has come to land, which means, you know, she's lost her tail. She is unable to speak. It's very Little Mermaid-esque. She can't speak, and she crosses paths with Nena, who is now this fierce pirate captain. And Nena seems to be developing a soft spot for Pearl. She wants to help this young girl. I think Pearl's only 16, and Lou has been tasked with finding Pearl and the conch and bringing all that back to his commanding officer. So they're on a collision course, but it hasn't happened yet. And again, we're at the halfway point, so I don't really know when that's going to happen. The writing of this book is pretty straightforward. I wouldn't say that there's anything particularly lyrical or poetic about it. There's so far lots of queer rep. We haven't heard anything about Pearl, but Lou and Nena are both queer. Lou is a trans man, and Nena is queer. I don't know if she's bi, she's pan, something like that. She has been in a relationship with Lou, and she's also, so far in this book, she has a romantic dalliance with a woman. There are some elements of this book that I'm not loving right now, and I don't know if that'll resolve as we go on in the book, but there are a couple things that I'm just noting. I'm not saying that I hate this book or anything. I'm having a good time, but there are a couple things that I'm noting that I hope get resolved so that at the end of the book I feel better about those things. And one of those things is that I don't feel really connected to any of the three main characters so far, and I think part of that is that while they're the three main characters, there are actually several other additional point of views. We go back and forth between Nena, Lou, and Pearl, but there's like a viceroy, there's a commander, I think, and just like other people's point of views get scattered throughout. So it kind of feels like I'm not having that much momentum with the three main characters, or at least I'm not having as much as I would like. The additional point of views honestly don't feel that integral this part. Like I don't feel like we needed to have all those additional point of views. I think we could have integrated the information we get from those scenes or those chapters a different way. I think it's thinning out the impression that the three main characters are having on me because they have less time on the page, and there's three of them, so we're already splitting this book between three people, and then there's additional characters. So yeah, I'm just not getting as much time to really fall in love with any of the main characters. Don't get me wrong, the majority of the book is the three main characters. It is still Nena, Lou, and Pearl. But yeah, for all the reasons I said, I just don't know that we needed the additional point of views. Another thing that I think that is making this book feel not quite as tight as I think it could be is the fact that part of the book, part of Nena and Lou's stories are told in flashbacks. So we get flashbacks to Lou's past, to Nena's past, and then also bits of their past together. So I don't necessarily think it's done poorly or that it's very disorienting. I just think that we have all of these points of views. Some of them are going back and forth in the timeline. They still haven't met yet, so the stories are still sort of separate at this point. So it's just not feeling super tight. It's feeling a little scattered in the narrative and the character development and the pacing right now. I'm going to keep reading, and my hopes are that in the second half of the book, I will see, sooner rather than later, hopefully, see the plot, the pace start to pick up, because it feels like there's just been a lot of setup so far. I hope that I become more invested in the three main characters. I'm thinking that it might happen more when the three of them are actually together. I think because Lou is still not a part of Pearl and Nena's journey. Obviously, he's tangentially involved, but he's not with them directly. I'm wondering if that's part of the disconnect, because I'm just kind of like waiting for that to happen. Because it says it's gonna, but it hasn't happened yet, and we're halfway through. So I'm hoping that once the three are together, their dynamics, their interactions, and all of that will make me feel a lot more invested in each of them and their relationships. Because right now, I feel like I'm waiting to get there, but I'm not quite there yet. I'm also hoping that we get more of the lore and background of the gods. Right now, there seems to be one main god, Ogwe, who is worshipped, but I don't really know much about him or his lore, or what's going on with all the stuff. So I would love to get more information about the gods and figure out what has been happening and why their island has been lost, the Mer People's island, their home has been lost, and I'm assuming we'll get more into that in the second half. So far, I'm enjoying it. I think it has really cool bones and a really cool premise. I think it's been a little rocky the first half. I feel like if the second half can pull some of the things together that I had mentioned and just tighten up a bit on the narrative, then I think that this will be really fun, but we'll see. I'm going to keep reading this over the next couple days. It might not take that long. Maybe I'll be done by tomorrow. I'm not sure. We'll see. But either way, whenever I finish this, I will come back and let you know what I thought of the Devil Deep. am back once again, this time to give you my final thoughts on The Devil of the Deep, which I just finished. This is the 6th book somehow that I have finished for this reading vlog, and I definitely have some thoughts. I'll do this first part as a quick spoiler-free section and say that I continue to have pretty similar feelings throughout the book. I would say that from start to finish, I had a good time overall and enjoyed the premise of this Haitian mythology, the Haitian mermaids, the pirates, and the gods. I mean, it's certainly not the first mermaid pirate book out there, but I think that the elements of the queer characters, the queer representation, and the Haitian mythology, the Haitian culture, I think that made it very fresh and fun to read about. I said in my midway check-in that I hope that we got to see more of the gods and the lore, and we definitely did, and I really enjoyed that part. I wish that it had been integrated a bit more throughout the book. We just kind of get a lore dump towards the end of the book, which, while again I enjoyed the lore and thought that it was really cool, it just kind of happened suddenly. It wasn't really integrated into the story, or it didn't seem like it was built up. It just kind of was laid at your feet. I think that overall, though, my main notes about this book, or the things that I wish had been done a bit differently, remain the same. I think that Valencia tried to do a bit too much in terms of the points of views, and I think that kind of bogged down / bloated the narrative a bit. I think that there needed to be more tightening around the 3 main characters. Not to say that there couldn't be any additional point of views, but I think that overall, with the plot and the pacing and the character arcs, character relationships, all of it just could have been tightened up a bit. It just felt like the book was spread out a bit too thinly for what is honestly a pretty short book. I think it tried to do a lot, and none of it was done quite to its full potential, in my personal opinion. Again, book was still fun to read. I had a good time, but if I'm being nitpicky about the things that I am nitpicky about as a critical reader, I do think that it just felt a bit messy or a bit underdeveloped in some of the key areas that I look for, like, you know, like themes or characters, character relationships, emotional impact, all of that. I also can't tell if this book is supposed to be a standalone or the first in a series. There just feels like there was a lot that was unresolved, and especially with the ending of this book, which again, I'll save for the spoiler section, but the way that it ends, I was like, is this supposed to be leading into another book? I looked online and I couldn't find any signs that this is supposed to be part of a series. I don't know if they're waiting to see how this performs or whatever, but yeah, there were many things with the relationships and characters that were just left floating about. We never get any closure for a bunch of stuff, so it just felt like I was left hanging, and I can't tell if that was on purpose because these are things that would be explored in a subsequent book or what? Okay, so for the spoiler section, I will try to keep this brief. We find out that Lou and Nena were actually both part of the same fleet, and that's where they fell in love and they got to know each other. But Nena and Lou started to see that their commanding officer was pretty corrupt and not a great person. So Nena at some point starts talking to other people on the crew, and they're like, you know, we don't want to follow this douchebag anymore. But Lou is very much a do it by the rules kind of guy. He's very dutiful, and this fleet is the first place that he has been able to live and exist with his identity as a man. He's left his home, and so he's creating this new place for himself, this new identity and personhood. So he, I think, has a reluctance to defy anything that's happening or to jeopardize that. But what happens is that Nena and the rest of the crew who are standing up to this commander end up getting executed. They are thrown overboard, shackled, and Lou knows that this is going to happen. Lou watches this happen and doesn't do anything to intervene or to really warn Nena that this is coming. None of it. So he is very complicit in the death of all of their crew members, and also in Nena being executed, even though she manages to survive. And Nena is obviously and understandably very pissed about this. She's like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, we weren't even doing anything bad. We were standing up against injustice, and you let us die for it. You didn't do anything to help us. And so when they meet, there is all of this bad blood between them, and it never really gets resolved. You don't really explore the complexity of Lou's decision to do what he did or any of that. And at the end of the book, Lou actually dies in the middle of this battle. He gets killed, and he gets killed without having had some sort of catharsis or some sort of resolution or conclusion with Nena. At the very, very end of the book, long story short, Nena has basically formed a relationship with another god, a goddess, who is part of the pantheon in this world. And Nena is like, I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to find you, and I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to bring you back to life, essentially. And that's how the book ends. And so I was just like, okay, so is there a part 2? Is the part 2 supposed to be Nena going to the underworld or the spirit world or something, or trying to find a way with these gods to bring Lu back. It was just so unclear. The book ended with a very unsatisfying conclusion to Lu and Nena's relationship, like this arc that has been built up throughout the book. He just dies, and then the way that it closes, literally the last line of the book is, actually I'll read it to you. Yeah, the last line of the book is, "I don't know if you can hear me, Lu," she whispered into the silence, "but I want you to know that I'm coming. I'm going to bring you back." That feels very much like it's setting up for another book, so maybe part of the reason that some of these things weren't explored or the characters weren't flushed out as much is because Valencia, they're planning to do that in a future book. But I do think that it is worth rating and thinking about this book as a standalone, because that's how I'm reading it, that's how it exists in the world right now. And I think as it stands, there were a lot of things left unfinished. There were some character arcs and character relationships that we don't see what happens with them at the end of the book, and that was also very unsatisfying to me. I'll end the spoiler section there. If this does end up being a series, I'm not sure if I'll pick up the second book. I mean, I might, just because I am unsatisfied with how a lot of the story ended, and I liked the queer representation, I like the setting, I like the premise, I like the magic, but I just feel like the book was a bit messy and unfocused, just like spread a bit too thin. So I don't know, I'm on the fence. We'll see once it happens, if it happens. This might be a standalone, in which case I would be more disappointed. I would give this book 3 stars. I think it was a good time overall, and I enjoyed the magic and the premise, but I think that it didn't really live up to its potential, partially because it was a bit unfocused, a bit messy at places, and I think could have done with a bit of tightening. Unfortunately, I think of the 6 books that I've read so far for this vlog, this is probably my least favorite, but honestly, listen, if out of 6 books my least favorite book is a 3-star, that's not the worst thing to happen in the world, because 3 stars is still a book that I like. I have notes and I would recommend with some disclaimers or warnings, but overall, it's not a book that I disliked. That's all I'll say right now for The Devil of the Deep, but I am a bit torn on what to do for next steps for this reading vlog, because I had originally considered reading Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart, and it is the next book that I'm going to read, but I haven't started editing this vlog yet, so I'm not sure how long everything is. It might be that just for my sake and for the sake of not putting out a video that's like 3 hours long, I might make The Devil of the Deep the last book that I read for this vlog. But I think what I'm going to do is I am still going to record myself reading this book and come in for like a halfway and final check-in, and if it ends up that the vlog is just too freaking long and I don't want to put a 7th book into the vlog, then maybe what I will do is I will put out a separate, just standalone reading vlog for this book by itself, because I'll already have the footage. If you've seen my previous review of the book Shuggy Bane, then yeah, you know that that book had me in my feelings. So I am suspecting that I will have a lot to say about this book, so it might make sense for me to do it as a standalone reading vlog. I mean, you'll know in a minute, because either after this I will come in for a halfway update for Young Mungo, or I will just go right into the outro. Whether I'm including this in this vlog or doing it as a separate vlog, or I just end up talking about it later in the month as part of the monthly wrap up, I am very scared. I'm very fearful of this book. I'm really excited to revisit Douglas Stewart's work with characters and the emotional turmoil that he put me through. But yeah, but I'm scared. I'm sure I'm going to cry. I'm very terrified. I am sad and I'm ready and I'm hydrated, because I am expecting many tears. I actually just sat down to film my July TBR. So if you see me in this exact same getup for another video, it is because I'm about to film that one. But I decided that while I have everything set up, I was gonna come in and do my quarter-way check-in for Young Mungo. I thought I would just do a halfway and a final check-in for this, but it's like I'm already set up and I've just gotten to the quarter-way point, so why not? I'm not gonna make this too long. It's gonna be a pretty quick update, hopefully. I'm gonna try and keep it brief, but so far I am really enjoying it. I have to go back and physically annotate / just like mark up the last like 70 pages that I read. I tend to, when I read books, I usually end up doing them as a mix of physical reading and audiobook, unless it's a really dense book or there's prose that I really enjoy, in which case I'll do it like fully physically or like mostly physically. But for this one, I have been doing it as a mix of audio and physical, and the last like 70-ish pages I've done as audio, so I don't have any of my annotations for the last couple chapters, but that is completely beside the point. So far, I'm having a really good time. I had a similar experience getting into Young Mungo as I did with Shuggy Bane. Shuggy Bane, I mentioned that it took me like a good 50, 75 pages to really get into the story. And I had the same experience with Young Mungo, where when I started this off, I just had a really hard time locking in. I just kept finding myself losing concentration or being unable to really like lock into the story in the way that I wanted to, which is pretty much exactly what happened with Shuggy Bane. It took me forever to get past like the first 50 pages because I just kept rereading passage after passage because I was like, what happened? I like don't remember. And so I had the same experience with Young Mungo so far, or at least like the first 75 pages. So, but I'm not deterred by it because I've seen what happens once I get into the meat of the story with Douglas Stewart. So I'm not deterred by it, but I can't say if I was just reviewing the first 75 pages that I feel like I'm having the greatest time, because I am trying to get myself hooked to the story. And I think part of that is because I think it's two reasons. I feel like for me there are two main reasons with Young Mungo that it's taking me longer than other books for me to really get hooked on the story. Like I said, it's tracking for how I've experienced his writing in the past with Shuggy Bane, but typically if a book is taking like 75, 100 pages for me to get hooked, it's probably not a book that I'm like gonna want to continue. But I did it for Shuggy Bane because of all the hype, and it paid off, and I have faith in Sir Douglas to do something crazy with this book. So I've kept on, and I'm at a point now where I'm feeling much more situated and like I understand what's happening. But I think for me personally, the reason that it's taking longer than usual for me to really feel situated and comfortable and like oriented in this story is for probably two main reasons. And I don't know if everyone would have this experience. There might be some people who like just dive into this book, into Douglas Stewart's books, and just like, yes, I'm here, I get it, I'm fully locked in. But the first reason for me has to do with the way that Douglas Stewart writes. And I don't even mean his prose. And his prose is, I've mentioned this before, but his prose isn't my preferred type of writing. He has a pretty clean, straightforward, clear type of writing. It's not particularly lyrical or poetic or any of that. He has a pretty crispy, clean type of writing, which is still really effective. The way that Douglas Stewart writes his stories, I feel like he takes his readers and just it feels like he just drops you in the middle of these people's lives. It feels very unceremonious. Like if you read an epic fantasy or like a quest story or some sort of thriller, I feel like generally you feel like you start at a point and you're like, the story is starting here. Like this is the beginning of a plot where we're moving forward, there's momentum. But it really feels like he is just taking you, it's like you moved in to a neighborhood and you're just kind of dropping into the middle of these people's lives. There's things happening, but it doesn't necessarily feel like the starting point of some sort of plotted start, middle, end type of story. And of course, he's a writer. He understands how to do that. There is a growing tension. There is building intrigue and all of that. But it just generally overall feels like you're just entering these lives. You're just finding yourselves in the middle of these relationships and these things that are happening. And so for me, in the beginning, it can be a little disorienting because he doesn't necessarily orient you very strongly. He says like, here are my characters. Here are their lives. Here's the things that are happening, and you're just like, okay. But he does it in such I can't think of another word other than ceremonious. It just happens. There is no fanfare around it. And so for me, I think that's part of the reason that I kept being like, okay, like what's happening, what's going on. And for me, just because of the way my brain is processing this, it's taken a little more effort to really lock in. And the second thing that's tripping me up a little bit is the fact that the family in Young Mungo, the main family, has striking similarities to the family in Shuggy Bane. And I mentioned this before, but I think it is a lot to do with Douglas Stewart's own background and him pulling from his own history and his own family and the things that he and his family have gone through. And so I think he reflects that a lot in his writing. But in Shuggy Bane, for example, Shuggy Bane is the main character. He has an older sister, an older brother, an alcoholic mother who is a bit neglectful, although she loves her children, but she is an addict. She's struggling through that, and he doesn't have a father figure because his mother and his father separate in Shuggy Bane. And a lot of that is quite similar in Young Mungo, although the individual characters are pretty different. Like the way they're characterized is not exactly identical, but Mungo is the main character. He's a titular character, and he has an older sister, an older brother. His father is not in the picture, he has passed, and his mother is addicted to alcohol and pretty neglectful and absent in their lives. So it's a very similar family structure, and I think I keep having to remind myself that this isn't Shuggy Bane. Like, these aren't the characters from Shuggy Bane. They're very different. For example, the brother and the sister, their personalities are very different from the ones that we had in Shuggy Bane. So they're not the same people. It's not a copy paste type of situation. But as I'm reading, I have to keep reminding myself that these are not the same characters, this is not the same family. So that I think also just contributed to me taking some time to get my feet under me as I'm reading the story. But none of that is really a criticism of the book necessarily, it's just the experience that I'm having. But all that aside, I will say that I am quite worried because I am finding myself very concerned for Mungo, and there was a scene, I'm gonna do no spoilers, but there was a scene early in the book where I was afraid that he was in some sort of danger, and I was listening to my audiobook on the subway back from work, and I had my hands over my face because I was so nervous, and I was clenched. I was so nervous. And it was fine. He was okay. He's okay. But I was freaked out. So if that tells you anything about me only being 25% of this book and being slightly disoriented in my experience, but already being very emotionally invested in Mungo and his happiness. A very brief summary of what's happened so far. We have Mungo, who is the youngest in his family. He has his older sister, Judy, who is basically having to mother Mungo because their mother is absent. And then we have Mungo's older brother, Hamish, who they just call Haha. And Haha is 18 and just a kind of troubled, abusive older brother who thinks he has to be the man of the house and has to show Mungo how to be a man and how to be tough. And I don't think that he really understands how to love and take care of his little brother. But so we have those three siblings, and their mom is Moma. Her name is spelled M-O-M-A-W, and she is a pretty absent, neglectful mom. She is addicted to alcohol. She is kind of trying to catch a man, so she's out there being a bit messy and forgetting that she has her kids at home to take care of. She just disappears and doesn't show up for weeks on end, and so the kids are left to fend for themselves. She's a young mother of three. Well, she's 34 or 32, I think, but her oldest is 18, so she became a mother quite young. You can tell that there is an amount of questionable affection that she has for her children, but she's a piece of work, and she needs a lot of work, and she probably needs a lot of help that she's not getting. But those are the basic dynamics of the family so far. The book so far is being split between two timelines. When the book opens, we have Mungo being sent on a fishing trip with these two men. His mom is sending him off on a fishing trip, and you get the sense that something has happened, and so she is trying to get him to, I don't know, go out and be manly, or I don't know, do something. She's trying to get him away. And you don't really know what has happened or what sort of incident has incited him being sent off like this. But we have Mungo on this fishing trip with these two grown men. So we have that one timeline, and then we have another timeline that is previous. So we're going back in time a bit to see Mungo before he meets James, who is supposed to become his first love. Right now, I have just recently met James. James is a young boy who is raising pigeons. They are young teenagers. It's not like Shuggy, where he was like a wee little baby. So they are young teenagers, and the two of them have just met. And I'm getting the sense that something must happen between Mungo and James, or there must be some sort of scenario around those two that leads to Mungo being sent away on this fishing trip. Obviously, I don't know what that is yet, so I could be completely wrong, but I feel like that's what's going to be revealed. From page 1, Mungo is just a sweetheart. Mungo just seems like a really kind soul who is trying to survive in a world where everyone is kind of harsh and troubled. And his relationship with his mom, I feel like, does remind me a bit of Shuggy Bane, where Shuggy just wanted to love his mom into bettering herself. He thought he could love her into wanting to save herself. And that's pretty similar here, because I think Mungo just tries to love on his mom. You know, his brother and his sister are very upset with her for very reasonable, understandable reasons. But whereas his sister lashes out to their mom and is quite combative with her, Mungo just tries to be gentle and take care of her and love on her and be there for her in the ways that she asks, and it is quite heartbreaking. So I'm scared to see where that relationship goes. But Mungo from the beginning is he's described as just this kind-hearted, sweet, good person. And let me see if I can find a line. I'll just read you a couple lines literally from the first couple pages, so these aren't really spoilers, that are describing Mungo. Her youngest son was like that. He smiled when he didn't want to. He would do anything just to make other people feel better. Jody said he was gullible. Moma said she had raised him to be cannier, less of anybody's fool. It was a funny thing to be a disappointment because you were honest and assumed others might be too. The games people played made his head hurt. So yeah, so far I have that Mungo is a gentle, kind, honest type of person who wants to do what he can to help other people. And we also find out that he has a physical tick when he's nervous or stressed. His face twitches, and so he has this tick. Between his gentle, kind nature and this physical tick that he is just unfortunately primed for bullying. And every time his brother is mean to him or tells him he has to be rougher, he has to be tougher, or like just says very cruel and homophobic things, it breaks my heart already. So that's about all I think I have to say so far for this quarter way update. I'm gonna try and keep it quick. Basically, it took me like 75 pages to really get into the gear of reading the story and to lock in and to familiarize myself with this new family that is not Shiggy Bane, and also just to feel comfortable and situated and settled into the characters and their lives. I think especially because there are these two different timelines. But I'm here now, I'm locked in, and we've just met James, so I am eagerly awaiting to see where that relationship goes, how their love starts to bloom. And I'm sure it's going to be happy and sweet, and there's gonna be rainbows all around, and everything's gonna be fine, and everything's gonna be happy, and everyone's gonna love each other. The contact lens in my left eye is trying to fall out, so I have to try really hard not to cry because I think a single tear shed and this is going to be ejected right from my eyeball. It keeps moving around, so I'm sorry. Yeah, this contact keeps migrating. It cannot figure out where it wants to be, so if I keep blinking a bunch, sorry, just ignore me. So I'm now oh my fucking god. Okay, so I'm just a little bit past halfway in this book, and this book is rough. Between this and this other book that I read, Betty, these coming of age stories are painful. All right, I'm gonna try to keep this short because my eye is actually killing me. But I will say that so far, halfway through this book, and it is really rough. It is a really tough book to read. I'll keep this part spoiler free, but there's a lot of really painful stuff to read about in this book, and I think that the characters so far are incredibly complicated, and there are some characters that you are rooting for, and there are some characters that, you know, if I had one bullet, I would line them all up and just have a go. I would just through every single one of them because there are some people in here Man, Douglas Stewart does some crazy stuff with these characters, though, which, again, I feel like I keep comparing it to Shiggy Bane, but in a very similar vein to Shiggy Bane, he creates a lot of characters who are very complicated and you have empathy for in moments, and in other moments you are just so frustrated with. They're just very real and very human and very messed up and very messy and very hopeful and very hopeless and so many other things, you know, the myriad of facets that a single person can have, I think is displayed in a lot of these characters. Douglas Stewart is incredible at writing these characters who are so multifaceted. There are moments where with each of these characters, whether it's the older sister Jodie or Haha or even Mungo, and especially their mom Moma, like all of them, there are moments where I am so sympathetic and empathetic towards them, and other moments where I just can't believe and I'm so mad at these characters and frustrated with them, and all of that is really believable. Like, I can understand how they came to this place, why they're making the decisions that they're making, why they're acting the way that they're acting. Mungo, oh god, I love Mungo and I want so much for him. It's just so hard seeing these people with so much love and so much care and so much softness to offer the world being hammered into different shapes that don't really fit who they are, and being treated the way that they're treated, being bullied and hated and told that they're wrong and that there's something wrong with them for something that they can't control. So yeah, it's been a really hard read. We're still going back and forth between the two timelines. There's the one timeline which is more current day, or not, it's still in the past, but the more current timeline where Mungo has been sent on this fishing trip with the two men, St. Christopher and Gallagate, and then there is the timeline which is told in flashback of Mungo meeting James, and I think that timeline is just leading up to showing us what happened that caused Mungo's mother to send him off on this fishing trip. The sense that I'm getting, which I think I mentioned in the quarterway check-in, is that Mungo and James are getting closer, they're becoming friends, and I am thinking that they fall in love, someone catches them, someone figures out that they're together and that they're gay, and because of that something happens, and Mungo's mom is sending him away on this fishing trip with these two men to learn to man up, to stop being gay, because that's how you fix it. You send your kids on a fishing trip. I think we're are heading towards a point where we'll see how these timelines converge, and I am very scared. I'm very scared for both timelines. It's rough on both fronts. It's a battlefield on either end. Even though each of the characters and each of the family members in Mungo are distinct from Shiggy Bame, I can see the ways that they are similar, because we have these three siblings who are all coping with and responding to and being shaped by their mother's addiction and her neglect and her selfishness and absence. They're all reacting to it in a different way. In Shiggy Bane, we had Shiggy, who tries to just love on his mother and be kind to her and be there for her, which is very similar to how Mungo is. He loves her very much, and he is just always willing to forgive her and always wants to be there for her. We have the older sister Jody in this book, and I can't remember her name in Shiggy Bane, but both of them put quite a bit of distance between themselves and their mother in different ways, but they react with more anger and distance and wanting to put boundaries between them and their mothers. And then the older brothers are quite different. They're quite different in personality and the way that they treat their family, but they are also two characters who are very hurt and shaped and wounded by their relationship with their family and their mother, and are navigating it and responding to it in different ways. But Mungo and Shiggy, these little boys, these young boys who are just full of so much love, they're killing me. All right, now for the spoiler section. This is the part where I'm going to have to try very hard not to cry, because I'm just so angry right now. We have the two separate timelines, and I won't go into too much depth. So in the flashback timeline, the one in the past, we have Mungo, who is becoming closer with James. James has recently lost his mother. Was it that recent? I can't remember, but his mom passed away, and they're talking about it. I think they're having like a sleepover essentially, and Mungo reaches out and he hugs James, and they have like a very tender moment of comfort and compassion and making this connection as they're taking a different step in their relationship and their friendship, and you can see how that compass might be tilting a bit more towards romance. So that is happening. They haven't, done anything yet. They haven't told each other they like each other, nothing like that at this point, but you can definitely see where the momentum is going. I won't go into too much detail, but Mungo's family, his brother and his sister, are both going through different things and figuring it out. Jody is trying to get out of this place. She wants to go to college, all this stuff. And the mom, she is still a mess. She's still a freaking mess. She's still drinking. She's still very lost and very selfish, and she feels very much like she hasn't been able to live the life she wants because she had her first kid at 17, and she's like, I'm only 34, like I just want to live my life and do things. I should still be able to do things. And it's rough because you also have these moments of tenderness between her and Mungo, and you can see the mother that she might be if she could get over her addiction, or if she could take a moment to think about her situation and maybe get help or support or something. You can imagine that she might be able to be a really wonderful, attentive mother, but that's not really the case right now. And then we have the fishing trip timeline, which I am hating. I am hating it so much. Oh god, it is so horrific. There's a scene earlier on, which I think I alluded to in the last check-in, where Mungo is in the tent with Gallagate, the older man, and Mungo is cold or says something about it being cold, and Gallagate basically gets out of his sleeping bag, goes to Mungo, and is cuddling him. He's like spooning him. And I was so nervous because I was like, what is this man doing to this child? And I was so uncomfortable and I was tense. I was like, he's gonna hurt Mungo. but nothing happens. Nothing happens, and I think the last line of that chapter is Mungo being like, I don't know what I was worried about. And I was second guessing myself. I was like, oh my god, like why was I judging this man? He's just trying to keep this boy warm or show him some sort of physical affection. And I was like, am I being so awful that a man showing a child some sort of physical affection to me automatically is ringing as like predatory? Like, am I a bad person? I had like a whole thing where I was thinking about this. I was like, am I picking up signs that aren't there? But no, I was not overreacting. The red flags were there and they were waving violently right in my face. Because where I am in the book, both Gallagate and St. Christopher have both assaulted Mungo, just in horrible ways. And it is so disturbing actually, because first it's Saint Christopher. Saint Christopher is in the tent with Mungo. You know, he assaults Mungo, and then Gallagate comes into the tent later and is like, what happened? Like, are you okay? And when Gallagate realizes what Saint Christopher did, he goes out and like berates him, yells at him, and tells him he's gonna call the police. And you're like, all right, okay, at least Mungo has this adult figure who will now hopefully like keep him safe from Saint Christopher. And so Gallagate comes into the tent and you think that he's, you know, comforting Mungo or trying to act as some sort of barrier, and then he assaults Mungo, and even worse, he assaults Mungo, and I was just like, what the hell is happening? And after he assaults Mungo, you find out in another chapter that is from Gallagate's point of view. It's third person, but it's from his point of view. You find out that he has been to jail because he is some sort of serial child abuser, child molester. He's molested or abused his own little brother and presumably other children, I'm not sure. But he goes to call his family, his own mother, and they're not happy to hear from him. They've obviously tried to cut off communications, and he's like, hey, like, mom, like, I'm out of jail, like, I'm trying to get better, I'm working on it, I'm going to AA. All of these are lies. You also find out he's like a serial liar. During the conversation, the mom's like, where are you? And he tells her he's on this fishing trip, and she asks, she's like horrified, she's like, do you have kids with you? Like, is there a child there? And he lies to her, but the mother is sharp. The woman knows, because she's like, please don't hurt the boy, like, don't hurt the kid that's with you. And you realize like just how much danger Mungo is in. And if you are following my personal assumption and logic that he has been sent here because his mom has found out that he's queer, he's gay, and is trying to fix that, it's like he's a sweet, wonderful, gentle boy who happens to just like another boy, and that somehow is less acceptable and more dangerous to his reputation and his family than being a child molester like this man. I don't know. It is so horrible, and I'm so nervous and so worried for Mungo because he's in some remote area. He doesn't even know where he is. He doesn't know what lock he's at. Like, and the adults have refused to tell him where he is. I mean, originally I think they tell him like it's, you know, it's for his own good, but you get the sense, oh, they did this so they could hurt him and he wouldn't be able to run. And they've told him, like, you know, you can't tell anyone because people already think you're queer and they hate you for it. So if you tell them that you've slept with these men, they're going to think that you're disgusting and you're a freak. And Mungo's like, yeah, I guess I can't ever tell anyone. And he's trapped in this place. There's a line in here somewhere where Mungo was like, he realized that these men were going to hurt him again. And that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm at an awful place in this book. I hate it. 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 And I want to see Mungo and James get closer together. I want to see their relationship blossom. I want to see them get comfortable with each other, and I want to see that love start to bloom. But at the same time, I'm like, well, I know that road leads me to where I'm at now, with Mungo being assaulted by these grown men, trapped in a tent with them in the middle of the wilderness. So I'm like, maybe I don't want that, but I want Mungo to experience whatever he's gonna experience with James, like the good of it, the joy of it, the love of it. I want him to have that. I am praying for a happy ending for Mungo. I'm hoping that this ends somewhere hopeful. But yeah, right now I'm just feeling pretty downtrodden and horrified and angry and frustrated. So that's where I'm at. Douglas Stewart didn't write this book to make me feel good, or at the very least, the first half of it, he did not write to make me feel any type of hopeful or joyful. So we'll see where we go from here. I don't think I'm going to come in for a 3/4 way check-in. I don't think I'm going to have time. But once I have finished this book, I will come back and give you a proper full review with more specific thoughts. And I'll probably read a few quotes from in here. There's some quotes, especially describing Mungo, that just, I don't know, they make my heart feel So happy and also so heartbroken. I don't think I'm gonna come back for a 3/4 way check-in. I don't think I'll have time, but I will come back once I have finished this book and I will finally wrap up this vlog 7 books later. I feel like it's been weeks. It's been 7 books. I've taken you with me on that book crawl. I've shown you my cosplay photo shoots with my friends. It's been a lot, and I'm scared to edit this vlog. I hope it is not like 3 hours long, but we'll get there when we get there. I will be back with my final thoughts on Young Mungo, and I am hoping I come back joyful and hopeful and feeling invigorated and like I had a good time reading the second half of this book, but I just don't think that Douglas Stewart is going to give that to me. But we'll see. Also, if you can hear Lucy snoring, it's because she is right there and she is so cozy and just snoring her little heart out. I love my cat. Okay, I'll be back. I finished Young Mungo, the last book that I am reading for this reading vlog, and ooh, boo-hoo, it was a time. This was a beautiful and tender and intimate reading experience, and it was also so horrible. So horrible in that I spent the entire time just watching my heart break into smaller and smaller and smaller and more scattered pieces and hoping that there would be some sliver of hope and joy by the end, because truly until like the last 10 pages of this book I was like, this was just one big pain fest. Before I go into more specifics in the spoiler section, I will say, I know I keep comparing it to Shiggy Bane, which might be annoying for people. If you haven't read Shiggy Bane, it might be completely useless to you, but because I had such an incredible time reading Shiggy Bane and it left such an impression on me, I can't help but compare the two books, especially because I know I've said this a bunch of times, especially because of the very similar family structures. It's almost impossible not to draw some comparisons. And I will say that with Shiggy Bane, I think the real heart of that story was the family and their relationship with each other. Especially between Shiggy and the mom Agnes, their relationship and the way that they treat each other, and that dynamic for me was really the heart of that book. And while the family dynamics are important in this book, I feel like they serve more as context and texture and as a way to illuminate more about Mungo and his struggle, more so than being the center core of the story. I think that Young Mungo is much more about the boy Mungo and his struggle with his sexuality, him coming to terms with who he is and what that means for his relationships with the people around him, what he's going to prioritize, how to be his own person, how to love the people around him when they are the way that they are, because he is a boy with so much love to give. Mungo made me cry several times in this book, and actually I'm going to read you a couple passages. I'm going to do it in the spoiler free section because I don't think that they're spoilers for anything plot wise or anything big in terms of relationships. It's just his sister describing Mungo, and I thought that they were just so tender and beautiful, and especially in light of the way that he is being treated, the description of him and what a wonderful person and boy he is just extra painful. So these passages are Mungo's older sister Jody, and she's thinking about Mungo and his relationship with their mom Moma. Her name is Maureen, but they call her Moma. It was as though Moma was a puppeteer and she had the tangled knotted strings of him in her hand. She animated every gesture he made, the timid smile, the thrumming nerves, the anxious biting, the worry, the pleasing, the way he made himself smaller in any room he was in, the watchful way he stood on the edge before committing, and the kindness, the big, big love. Mungo's capacity for love frustrated her. His loving wasn't selflessness, he simply couldn't help it. Moma needed so little, and he produced too much, so that it all seemed a horrible waste. It was a harvest no one had seeded, and it blossomed from a vine no one had tended. It should have withered years ago like hers had, like Hamish's had. Yet Mungo had all this love to give, and it lay about him like ripened fruit, and nobody bothered to gather it up. Mrs. Campbell had once said Mungo's forgiveness was biblical, but Jody didn't much care for the Bible. She thought it was stupid of him to be so easily exploited. She thought it was a little sad, a little bit weak. Her brother had all this love and forgiveness for an elfin wee woman who thought about herself first and last and in between. And this last little bit here, ooh, I thought that this was so painful. Her brother was her mother's minor moon, her warmest sun, and at the exact same time, a tiny satellite that she had forgotten about. He would orbit her for an eternity, even as she, and then he, broke into bits. Mungo. Douglas Stewart, why did you write such a wonderful, sweet boy? I just am so heartbroken thinking about the love that Mungo had to give throughout this book. Douglas Stewart did something crazy, honestly, writing Mungo the way that he did. this incredibly tender and sweet, wonderful boy with just so much love, and the things that he has to go through are harrowing, horrific, and I'm not gonna talk about it too much because there's no way to talk about it without spoilers, but I was just so hopeful for something, anything to look like it could turn out well in the end, because like I said, it just felt like it was punch after punch after punch after punch, and I was just watching Mungo get knocked down and then knocked down and then kicked and then knocked down again and then punched in the teeth. And I was like, please, I just need a win for this boy. I was so fearful for how this book was going to end, and again, no spoilers. I will not say how anything turns out, but yeah, the story is one that I'm glad was very different from Shiggy Bane. But yeah, I just think that it's really special that these two books really felt like a look into the author and what he's thinking about, or maybe what he's gone through, or what he has seen happen to people around him. I don't know. I don't know. It just felt like with these two books, it was a very intimate experience. If I had to pick a favorite between this and Shiggy Bane, I don't know that I could immediately. They were impactful for different reasons. I think right now, because I've had more time to sit and think about Shiggy Bane, I would say that is my favorite of the two books, but they're both so strong. I would recommend if you have the stomach for some content that is pretty dark, but really beautiful, wonderful, important, heartbreaking story. Quick spoiler section for young Mungo. The two timelines really, a lot happens in both timelines, and things really ramped up in the last quarter of this book. In the timeline that is the past, that leads up to Mungo leaving on the fishing trip with the two men, we find out that he and James were caught by his older brother Hamish, Haha, and Haha attacks James. He's very badly hurt, and I think and I don't know if he brought other boys, but they also destroy the dovecot that James had and killed or maimed a lot of the birds, which was really fucking awful. And it was after finding out what had happened between James and Mungo. His mom takes him to one of her AA meetings with her, and she agrees to let these random two men who are at the meeting with her take her boy on some trip to a remote place that she doesn't even know. She doesn't even know where they're taking her son, but she just like hands him off to these men who end up being St. Christopher and Gallagate. And it's just like, what the fuck kind of mother is just like, do these random two men she knows nothing about, like, yeah, sure, take my son to the woods, and I have no idea where he is, but that sounds like a great idea, because I would rather him be in harm's way than be in love with a boy. I don't know. At some point at the end of the book, she's like, oh yeah, I called the police because I realized like I didn't know where you were, and I couldn't even tell them where you were because I didn't know. And I'm like, even the police were like, ma'am, you just let your son go off with these men that you don't know and you don't know where he is? Like, that's insanely irresponsible. I will say I had a lot less sympathy for Moma than I did for Agnes, even though with Agnes I was so frustrated with her in a lot of different ways. I felt like Agnes made more of a genuine effort to fight her addiction and to be there for her children. And again, neglect still happened, abuse still happened, but I think I had more hope for Agnes and more sympathy for Agnes than I did with Moma. And part of that, again, is because the focus was different. We were looking more at those relationships, and we don't get any part of this book from Moma's perspective, I don't think. So that could have colored it. But whatever. She sends her boy off with these men, and that's where we start the book when Mungo is leaving for this fishing trip. The last check-in, I had said that he had been assaulted by both St. Christopher and Gallagate. The two men continue to be absolutely fucking disgusting creatures. And actually, over the course of the next day or two in that timeline, Mungo ends up killing both of them, once in self-defense and once more as like retribution. Gallagate had actually tried to drown Mungo because he didn't trust that Mungo wasn't going to tell people what happened on this trip. But he kills these men and then he runs away. He's trying to get back home, and he gets picked up on the road by a man in a car who is giving him a ride. And I was so nervous too, because I was like, please don't let this man be another horrific person who's going to try to hurt this young boy. But actually, it wasn't like that at all. It was actually quite sweet and kind. The man could tell that something had happened, even though Mungo kept lying. He was like, he could tell that something had happened to Mungo. He was obviously hurt. He was obviously scared. And he tells him this story about his own son who is queer in some way, and he tells him, I can't remember what the line is, but he says, so this man Callum is telling Mungo about his son who is also queer, and he says to him, well, I just want him to know that I'm proud of him, no matter what, you know? That made me so teary-eyed because, Mungo is in this place where these awful things have happened to him because of his queerness, because he's gay, and then he's heading back to a family where he doesn't really believe that he's going to be able to tell anyone. He can't tell his mom, his brother, or his sister. He doesn't really trust that they're going to care for him or love him or believe him or see him in the same way if he tells them that he's gay or he tells them that these men assaulted him. And to have this stranger tell him, there are people out there who will be proud of you and who will love you and who will care for you even though you are gay, as though that were some great sin. I think that that was just something that Mungo really needed to hear. And actually at the very end of it, he gets home, he sees James across the street. James is still like fucked up looking from when Haha beat him up, and the implication at the end of the book is that the two of them are going to leave together and start a new life somewhere else. And oh yeah, so this book really waited until the very end to give you any sense of hope or possibility for a better life for Mungo and James, but it happened, it came, and I needed that. And yes, the two of them are going to continue to have issues and they're going to have to fight things and all of that, but just to know that they have that chance, because there was a moment where I really thought that Hamish had killed James, that the boy was dead, and then Mungo was going to come back to hear that James was dead. They are getting a chance to be together and to be tender together, and I am so grateful that Douglas Stewart threw me that lifeline, because I was ready to knock my head into a wall, because this book was so painful. In the timeline that's told in the flashbacks, the one that is leading up to what happened before Mungo was sent on this fishing trip, we have a lot of stuff that happens. I mean, first of all, one wonderful thing that happens before all the shit hits the fan is that James and Mungo start a relationship. They've told each other how they feel, and they are just they're so sweet and awkward and sort of stuttering in their attempts to get to know each other and to find out what their boundaries are with each other. And in these descriptions of them trying to learn how to be physical with each other, like how to be intimate, I just thought that it was, again, like it was so sweet and realistic and awkward, and I don't know, I just thought it was really beautiful, and I was lapping it all up because I was trying to soak in just a little bit of bliss, because I knew that shit was gonna hit the fan. I knew that we were just walking towards some sort of disaster, and surely enough, disaster did come. I'll finish the spoiler section there, and just like that, I finished the 7th book that I plowed through for this reading vlog, which means that I read, let me just do a recap of all the books. So I started off with The Salt Grows Heavy, then I read The Monk and the Robot Duology, which is A Psalm for the Wild-Built and A Prayer for the Crown Shy. Then I read A Language of Limbs, Sunburn, Devil of the Deep, and Young Mungo. If I had to pick a favorite from this list, I think that it would be tied between A Psalm for the Wild-Built and Young Mungo, they're both my favorites, I think, but for very, very, very different reasons. A Psalm for the Wild-Built is, I mean, if I had to rate it based on the rainbow rating system that I've been using for my queer recommendations, this is a one rainbow book in that there are queer characters. Both of the main characters are non-gendered, they're genderless, but the story isn't about being queer. It's not about, coming out, or it's not about homophobia or anything like that. But this story was so warm and loving and kind, and such an invitation to think about yourself as having worth, whether or not you have ambitions or a career or a purpose. And I think it's something that everyone needs to read and hear about. So I think that this would be a favorite for sure. But the other favorite, Young Mungo, is like a 3 rainbow book for sure. This is very much about being queer. It's about the queer experience. It's about coming out. It's about homophobia. It's about all the things you have to navigate as a young person in a society that doesn't want you to be who you are, doesn't want you to love who you love. Very, very different, very, very different tone. But those 2 books are probably my favorite. I don't have any books from this reading vlog that I hated or thought were really awful, but if I had to pick one that I thought was the weakest, it would be Devil of the Deep. That I didn't think that this book was awful or horrible. I'm not mad that I read it, but I just don't think it was as strong as it could have been for how cool the premise was. But still, I would recommend it selectively to people, and I still think that this was a fun time. Overall, a huge success. I can't remember if, as I was doing my check-ins, I gave you any star rating, so I'll go through and do that now. I would say The Salt Grows Heavy is like a 3.5, 3.75. I really liked it. Psalm for the Wild-Built is 5 stars, easy. Prayer for the Crown Shy, also really loved this, maybe 4 or 4.5 stars. A Language of Limbs is one that I think I mentioned. It's hard for me to rate this because I read it with such a skewed perspective of what I thought the story was, so I feel like I'm not doing it justice, but I think I would give this 4 stars, 3.75 or 4 stars. Now that I've sat and thought about it, I think it was a really strong book. I screwed up. Sunburn, I think I would give this also like 3.75 or 4 stars, depending on the day that you ask me. I really liked it. If I think about it some days, I think I loved it, and if I think about it other days, I think I really liked it. Either way, a strong book, would recommend. Devil of the Deep, I would give 3 stars. Half Notes, still a fun time. Young Mungo, I've had the least time to sit with and really think about, so I'm not positive, but maybe 4 stars, 4.25. Love this book, a lot of heartache, but still managed to get just a teaspoon of hope. This video will probably be coming out right at the end of June, at the end of Pride Month, but like I have said in a number of videos now, you always have the opportunity to read queer stories. You don't have to save it for June. So all throughout the year, please be picking up books by queer authors with queer stories, with queer characters. There's so many ways to interact and engage with queer writing, so just remember to try to do it as you are just moving about your life through the rest of the year, because there's some good shit out there. I promise you, it's worth it. It's to your benefit to be reading these stories. If you've read any of the books that I covered in this reading vlog, let me know what you thought, and if you have any recommendations for books that you think I should check out based on what I've enjoyed or what I've said, let me know. And I do genuinely mean that. I do really want your recommendations, and I have added so many books to my TBR and put books on hold at the library based on things that you guys have recommended, and there have been so many books that I'd never even heard of before, so I definitely appreciate when you take the time to let me know a couple books. And my TBR is definitely expanding at an exponential rate since I made it this channel, because you guys give me really good recommendations. Thank you for watching whatever amount of this vlog you ended up watching. I appreciate you. Happy reading, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. And I'm pretty sure that either the it's told in first person, it's told person, it's told Jesus Christ.